Time team have been invited to dig in some big back gardens before, but never one as big as this, and never one so jam-packed with prehistoric mystery. Some archaeologists think that this strange circular feature here on the banks of Loch Migdale in the Highlands of Scotland could be a Stone Age henge. And this small pile of stones actually in Loch Migdale could be the tip of a man-made island where Stone Age men actually lived. And that's not all. Over there, a huge hoard of Bronze Age artefacts was found on that hillside. So what on earth was going on in this beautiful back garden over 4,000 years ago? As usual, Time team have got just 3 days to find out. This site is an archaeologist's dream. Being given the chance to excavate a possible ancient man-made island is rare enough. But if the circular earthwork really is a henge and we can prove that the two sites are archaeologically connected, then this would be one of the most remarkable prehistoric sites in Scotland. So is your gut instinct that this is prehistoric?
Yes, 100%.
Miles?
Yes, I think a gut instinct it's prehistoric.
But caution.
Caution, yeah, word of caution at the moment. The actual basic shape of the monument fits also a shape of other monument types like windmills, hut circles, various types of burial monument. But I think we can safely say at the moment that I think it is going to be prehistoric.
If it's prehistoric, what could it be?
I think we're looking at a thing like a henge, like Stonehenge, only a tiny pocket-sized example. Tiny little thing, but it's got an entranceway here, which is looking out over the lake and, if you like, the world of the ancestors, the next world. So it's a religious site.
Have people always known that this was here?
Well, it's been an obvious feature, obviously, for thousands of years, but certainly archaeologists have known it's here at least since 1970, when they cut out a quarter of this monument then. Unfortunately, their results were quite inconclusive, so what we're doing is re-excavating the area and hopefully trying to make sense of what it was they found.
The first job is to remove all of the peat to define the area of the previous excavation. Geophys are in there as well, conducting a survey to see if there are any below-ground features at the centre of the circle. Henges tend to come in all shapes and sizes. This one, if it is one, is tiny, only 12 metres in diameter. They were usually places of worship or burial dating from the late Stone Age. Often divided and bordered by standing stones or wooden posts, henges were the focal point of prehistoric ritual. Only 200 metres away to the east is the intriguing little island in the loch. Roughly circular in shape, it doesn't look like a naturally occurring geological feature. It looks like a man-made island called a crannog. Crannogs were places of habitation and refuge. Fortified raised enclosures constructed of layers of rocks shored up by stakes driven into the loch bed connected to the land by a causeway. Some were large enough to house whole communities. This one, if it is a crannog, was probably only big enough for one roundhouse, one family and a few animals. Is it a crannog?
It's a mound of stones that could be a crannog. And we've looked at a lot of mound of stones like this. Sometimes you can say they're definitely glacial dumps and therefore definitely not a crannog. With this one, we can't say it's definitely not. And the hints are that when you look at it underwater, the sloping sides are not a natural slope. So it looks as if it's been built from that point of view. It's quite circular. That suggests a crannog.
How are we going to dig it?
Well, I'm told it is just made of a big pile of stone, so obviously, provided we're careful and we can record the structure of the mound as we go down, by the sounds of it, it's just a matter of moving stones.
We will shift stones until we find something that says this is artificial. Then we'll be very, very careful and we'll do everything in the most archaeologically exact manner, as we do on other sites like this. But at the moment, it's not an archaeological site as such.
This area of the Highlands is jam-packed with ancient archaeology. Loch Migdale is surrounded by Neolithic and Bronze Age sites, mostly field systems and hut circles. But it was also the place where in 1900 the world-famous Migdale hoard was found. A unique collection of bronze axes, jet jewellery and finely worked metal. Rob and Cara, who own the land, appear to be living in an archaeological gold mine.
Did you know anything about the history and the archaeology when you bought the estate?
We knew that there were hut circles throughout the area, not just on our land, but I mean, there's an area called Erdens, which is further back up on the moor, which again is heavily circled, as it were. So we were aware of the artefacts that were in the area, although had not been sort of studied.
And then there's the Migdale hoard.
And then there's the Migdale hoard.
Did that actually come from your land?
It did come from our land, yes.
The Migdale hoard is really interesting because that's the one bit of archaeology from this area that's actually been dated. The crannog on the henge, we don't know what date though. We've had no finds from them at all. The Migdale hoard is the only finds. But do you know exactly where it came from?
It was found in a quarry that's over there, a granite quarry that was being blasted about 1900. And when they were blasting, apparently, this hoard appeared. And it's hard to imagine exactly how it was found if they were actually blasting the quarry. You know, a rock came off and there it was sitting. Well, possibly.
I think we need to try and find a bit more about that because that might hold the key to telling us what was so important about this area that it has a crannog and a henge, if that's what they turn out to be.
The Migdale hoard was a key factor in helping archaeologists understand the Scottish Bronze Age. But the exact place of discovery and blasting has been lost. We're going to try and find it. It's taken Nick, Phil and the crannog team nearly all morning to stockpile the excavation gear, compressors and suction dredgers on the island. But at last it's time to start diving. They've decided to put in 2 trenches, one in almost 2 metres of water, the second in only a few centimetres. Before he's allowed to dive, Phil's got to learn the strange techniques of crannog digging. The biggest problems seem to be how to dig lying face down in the water, and how on earth do you know where your trench begins and ends?
I mean, is this there purely to aid the recording of the site, or is it just to mark the edge of the trench?
It really is just to show us a general area to excavate initially.
So whereas on land we'd use string and nails, underwater use a metal frame?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
Let's move it.
Okay, what we want to do is go backwards.
Right.
You come out to about here.
Right.
By that time I should be able to just drop my end.
Why are we putting this trench over here in particular?
Because this section of the site looks most artificial.
Right.
It's almost vertical stone face. The stones look almost like they've been laid. And the bottom is not too silty.
Nick's going to be working in the deep trench. His first job, start shifting the large rocks from inside his metal frame. It's back-breaking and slimy work. Back on dry land, John's got the results of his survey.
What they're telling me is that we're not dealing with a settlement site.
And you can tell that from
the lack of noise, basically. I've marked the approximate position of the ring, and you can see there's just 2 spikes inside, and that one there is clearly that igneous stone. We're not getting any areas of burning. The reason I don't see the bank and ditch is because it would fit with it being a henge-type monument.
Right.
There's no sort of rubbish deposits.
There's no burning.
No
there's
burning.
Hearth or anything.
No hearth. People haven't lived here. That's
Right.
what the results are telling me.
Well, that's encouraging. So we can cross off domestic settlement from our list of potentials.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So I think that's official then. From now on, we can all call it a henge. Everyone apart from Stuart, that is. If we've got a ritual site down at that henge and we've got a ritual site at that crannog, you're looking for where the people lived.
Well, I am, but I hate that word henge you've just used.
Why?
Well, a henge conjures up images of Stonehenge, huge, great site, and what we've got here is quite clearly a small site.
So if Stonehenge is a big cathedral, that's more like the parish church?
That's it. I think we're looking at a small community on the lakeside here with their own special place where they might worship or bury people, yeah.
So what should we call this thing?
I'd call it an enclosure for the time being, I think, until we've really know what's going on.
Have you found anything up here?
No, not really yet, but what we have got is the Sites and Monuments records. You can see on here all these references to prehistoric sites around here. And I'm trying to see if any of these features around here might actually help us tie your henge, my enclosure, to the crannog and what might be going on around here in the prehistoric period. You can see there's all sorts of things on the surface around here.
There's a very nicely shaped hillock just there, isn't there?
Yeah, it's just a nice natural hill.
Is it
Yeah,
now?
well spotted.
And
yeah.
what about these two little piles of stones here?
Yeah, they're piles of stones as well. These are our clearance cairns there. You see to the fields up here, they're nice and clean, they've been improved for pasture.
Yeah.
Well, one of the farming activities is to get rid of the stones and they dump them in piles. And that's what these are, they're stones that have been taken off these fields. But what's interesting about these is it's very much the same sort of activity as the prehistoric farmers who built the enclosure or henge would have been performing to clear the ground prior to starting to cultivate it.
I've always suspected there was more to landscape archaeology than met the eye. Back at the incident room, Carenza's hot on the trail of the Migdale hoard.
Where did it actually come from? Do we know?
Well, we know that it was found in May 1900 when they blasted the top of a granite knoll. And there's a rather romantic watercolour which doesn't necessarily give you an accurate rendition of the landscape. And it says it was found in a weathered joint of granite knoll. And it may well be that they, from the condition of the objects, that they found it as they were putting the explosives down in a cleft in the rock.
So what actually was in the hoard?
Well, there were a lot of items. There was a flat axe head, and it's been tinned. The surface of it has been enriched with tin, and it would have given the axe head a silvery effect on the surface. There's also 6 armlets, which are graded in size, and if you were to wear them together, they look like a spiral armlet. There are 2 other things which have been called bangles. They may well have been anklets. And then you have these tubular sheet bronze beads, which had willow to strengthen them inside. And the fascinating thing about these is that they give us direct contact with Central Europe.
Really? From that far away?
Absolutely.
Whereabouts in Central Europe?
Bavaria in particular.
So they were having extensive contacts with, well, Europe and the rest of England?
Yes, that's right, and also with Ireland as well. We're at the northeast end of the Great Glen here, and we know that they were importing copper from southwest Ireland for making their objects here.
I mean, one crucial question is what date is this hoard?
We were able to get a radiocarbon date from the willow inside one of the beads, and that's given us a date of between 2200 and 2100 BC, which is exactly the time when you get the beginning of tin bronze metallurgy in Scotland.
So effectively, what the hoard is telling us is that here at Migdale, we've got a very expensive offering of items from sort of all over the known world virtually at that time being made to the gods. So it suggests there's something very important going on here.
It may be that henge site there is a very prestigious burial site, particularly given its location at the end of the loch.
Actually, in the loch, Phil, as a novice crannog digger, begins his excavation by troweling in the shallow end. He's carefully loosening the silt on the bed of the loch, looking for anything that looks unnatural. The spoil's being drawn away by a suction dredge, which aids the diver's visibility by depositing the mud over 30 metres away.
It's weird down there though, isn't it?
As Nick works down, the rocks are getting smaller and smaller. A sequence of sorting that doesn't usually occur naturally. It's looking more and more man-made. But geological evidence isn't archaeological evidence. With most of the rocks removed, he's beginning to come down onto a new layer of sediment, a layer that appears to contain organic material. Possibly the first evidence of archaeology anywhere on the entire site. It's the end of day 1, and we're now almost certain this is what we hoped it would be, a Bronze Age henge. There's still quite a lot of work to do on it. We're going to clear out the whole of this section of the ditch, but the exciting place is here. The ditch terminus that marks the exit out of the henge, and it seems to have been a particularly significant area for Bronze Age people. There could well be finds here. If we're going to work out who the people were who built this place and how long ago they built it, then the evidence lies here. Join us after the break.
Experience the past like never before with History Hit's award-winning original documentaries and ad-free podcasts with our expert historians like Dan Snow, Susanna Lipscomb, Lucy Worsley, Mary Beard, Tristan Hughes and myself, Matt Lewis. Sign up for an exclusive discount using the link in the description and embark on your historical journey from the wonders of ancient Egypt and the life of Anne Boleyn to the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte and the discovery of Shackleton's Endurance. Get history wherever, whenever, exclusively on History Hit.
Beginning of day 2 at our Bronze Age site here at Loch Migdale in the Highlands of Scotland. And you may think that trying to establish whether this little pile of stones is man-made would be a doddle, but in fact, technically, it's been one of the most difficult things we've ever had to do. It took our dive team virtually all day yesterday just to set up and prepare, and they were really inhibited by the fact that we can't move through the middle of this little island because we'll stir up the debris and affect the visibility. So we have to pick our way round these stones all the time, which takes forever. But nevertheless, by 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, they put 2 trenches in, one over there and one over there, and already it looks like they're coming up with the goods. What is it that's been making you so excited, Phil?
Well, Tony, in the first trench, the one on the actual top of the mound over there behind you, we've actually got fragments of charcoal.
What's so significant about that?
Well, charcoal means burning, and burning is a sign, a very good sign of where people were actually living. But the really good news is in that trench in there, in the water.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I haven't been able to see it because it's so deep and the visibility is so poor. All I've been able to see is this wonderful plan with these timbers. We've actually got timbers under the water. More importantly, we've got a stake which must have been driven in, and I'm dying to see it.
So should we have a look at them?
Oh, look at the side, look at that, look now then. I reckon that timber is this one here, I reckon.
Yeah.
That rounded bit, I reckon that rounded bit is that bit there.
Yeah.
Now look, there's the stake. You see that round thing? It looks like a sort of tuppenny piece down there.
Can you tighten up on that stake a bit?
Yeah, look at that.
Oh, wow!
Look at that. That is not accidental. That is somebody who's actually driven that stake into the ground. And then just to the side of that. Oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah,
look.
yeah.
So we're looking, and according to this, it's 64 centimetres long and 12 centimetres wide, so it's quite a big timber.
Fantastic.
It's incredible the degree of preservation. These little tiny, see these little the little tiny bits of timber. That's this little group there. Yeah, look at it.
Oh, they look like they're driven into, don't they?
The other interesting thing is there's lots of organic remains down there as well, so we should actually be able to tell what the world was like, or the landscape was like at the time these timbers were down there.
What is that murky stuff that you were showing us down there?
The organic material that I was disturbing is broken down vegetation, but the fibrous bits are bracken. And bracken's what they laid on the floor to make the place comfortable, a nice place to live in.
Are you happy that just from the evidence that you've seen, that what you've seen below the surface is man-made and is old?
Yesterday I was not too sure. I thought we had a big mound of stones. Now we absolutely have an archaeological site, and a really nice one.
With a forest of timber on the loch bed, we're going to be spoiled for choice as to which 1 or 2 pieces to sample for carbon dating. All of this murky organic stuff needs to be carefully bagged, sampled and cleared. But with it floating around everywhere, obscuring the visibility, it could be hours before we can see what else is down there. Today, the whole focus of the dig has shifted onto the crannog, and even though it's freezing cold down there, everyone's getting really excited. But there's still a few brave people digging away here at the henge. Yesterday, right at the end of the day, I said that they were going to excavate in here, which was the exit to the henge, because we might get some finds here, and also that they would be clearing away this ditch. And you haven't done either of those things typically. Why not?
But it's turned out to be a lot more complicated than we thought. When I started troweling out, what I found there was stone packing, and there were dark patches and pale patches. I think we've got a post at the end here.
Now this is a cheat. You've just marked this with the end of your trowel, haven't you?
I have. I mean, if you actually look at it, that material is distinctly darker than the pale stuff over here. So this is probably peat that formed in the top of the void left by the post when it rotted.
You've done quite a lot of cleaning over here, haven't you?
Yes, yes. Well, what we've got here is the bank, which goes around the outside of the ditch. And you can see there's a lot of stones over there. Those stones, I think, are stopping the bank from flowing out. And the material at the core of the bank there is the stuff that's come out of the ditch.
I've got basically the same thing as what Francis has got. You know, he's got the post hole here.
Yeah.
Well, I've also got one here,
yeah.
which is, you know, respecting the sides of this entranceway. We've got the stones up against it, and inside at the base, we've got a lot of decayed quartz chips.
Can I borrow you for a minute?
Mm-hmm.
Just stand there. Francis,
Yeah.
if this is supposed to be this ritual exit of the henge, how come it's so narrow that, well, you're standing on the exit, but I'm in the ditch?
Well, it's deliberately narrow. I mean, the whole point of an entrance into something like this is that it's special. You're leaving the ordinary world and you're going through a narrow entrance into a confined space. It's all part of cutting it off from the normal world.
Just outside the henge, Miles is uncovering a jumble of broken stones, which seem to be lying in a small pit, right in the front of the entranceway.
You had absolutely no finds out of this site at all?
No finds, no, apart from quartz chips. Quartz chips was all we found.
Carenza's tracked down Tony Woodham, the archaeologist who first dug the henge back in 1970, to find out more about his excavation.
We only dug the centre of the circle from the inside of the ditch to the centre. It was about a foot deep.
Right, so we've got a bit further to go to hit
yes.
that area.
Yes,
and then
indeed.
you've got this black earth with charcoal.
That's correct, yes.
And that was a
yes.
sort of deposit cut into the sand, was it?
It was lying on top of the sand.
Right.
Lying on top of the sand, and we removed that, and it was just clean sand underneath. It was in my mind that possibly the site had been used during the Bronze Age for a cremation cemetery.
Now we've confirmed it's definitely a henge, we're still struggling to find out what it was used for. Stuart's now taken up the challenge to find the site of the Migdale hoard, and local resident Marion Fraser has brought him some crucial information.
I was certainly taken there to see the site.
You were?
Some years ago.
Well, how many years?
Many years ago.
All right, I won't ask how many, you're a lady.
And I certainly saw the granite.
Can you tell me where it is?
Well, it's on top of Carnafeach, which is translated into English as Talachil.
Right.
And in the vicinity of Coolnara.
So you're saying it was found up on Tulloch Hill, and that's the hill just up there above us, isn't it?
The path is just beside the cattle grid, up to the ridge.
We were told it was sort of way over there, which it doesn't appear to be. So it's, you know, to get this information is really valuable.
Even though she was only a child when she was taken to the hoard site, Marion has given Stuart a detailed description on how to get there.
Following directions that Marion gave me, she said you go over the cattle grid, and this is the cattle grid here, and she said you should walk up towards the mast, which there's the mast on top of the hill just up on the right. It's staggering here walking, so right in the middle of all this prehistoric activity on the surface. You don't have to dig to find this. And these mounds here, they're everywhere. It's about every 50 yards where the Bronze Age farmers, the people who built our henge, this is what they leave behind them. These are their fields, this is where they were living and where they were farming.
We're all on a mission today to try and find out if the hoard, henge and crannog were in any way archaeologically connected. Henry, we're looking for evidence of human beings from thousands of years ago. Is GPSing the lake really going to tell us anything we don't know already?
I think it will. What I'm going to do is try and create a three-dimensional model of the base of the lake, so really just to look at the landscape context of the crannog.
But won't the landscape have changed since the days when people were living on that crannog?
Well, I'm hoping that maybe we might see some sort of change in topography at the base, maybe something which might suggest a causeway between here and the
A path out from here to the crannog?
Yeah, yes.
So the little variations that you can read might give us evidence of a pathway?
I mean, we can hope.
Yeah. Henry, I'm going to stop this interview right now because the water has just started to leak over the top of my Wellingtons. Up on the hillside, and with only an artist's impression of the hoard site to go on, Stuart's now checking out every boulder.
Now this is exactly the sort of thing that is shown on the diagram, where the artist at the time showed a rock with lines across it, which sort of matches up with this type of weathering we've got on here. This is exactly the type of rock that at the time they were digging out to cut for creating lintels and frames for doors, gate posts, that kind of thing. So again, all the ingredients that we're looking for are up on this hillside.
Henry?
Hi, Prancer.
This is Sandy, who farms all the land around here.
Hi, Sandy.
Hello, Henry.
And he reckons that as a child, he used to be able to, when the water in the loch was really low, actually walk out to the crannog along a zigzag causeway.
That's precisely what I'm trying to find just here. Where was it?
Just about the evergreen tree there.
Just literally just here?
Yes.
And how deep was it?
When the water was low, to be about 2 feet below the water.
Oh, that's fantastic news. Excellent. Thanks, Sandy.
According to Sandy, that should place the causeway about here. But to find the exact route, Henry's still going to have to survey the loch bed. With 3 orbiting satellites to give a global accuracy of a few centimetres, he'll be able to chart every tiny change in depth and produce a 3D model of the underwater terrain.
Well, now I'm standing pretty close to where the artist drew this drawing from, I'm sure of that, where the Migdale hoard was found. It's Migdale rock over there. I've got a knoll, high knoll to my left. I've got the curve of the lake to my right down there. This perspective is now matching very closely. It reinforces to me this connection between where people are living up here, we've got the evidence for it on the surface, quite clear evidence, and where they were being buried and where the kind of the religious side of their life, as it were, at the end of the loch. There's a connection, a visual connection between the two here.
This is important information because we've finally confirmed the position of the hoard, almost a mile from where everyone previously thought it was discovered.
Before I go, there's one thing I've got to do though. I must get a correct grid reference to this to ensure it goes in the record. And in a few seconds it'll give me a grid reference which we can then put on the Sites and Monuments record so other people can come back to this place.
Phil spent most of today lying face down in the freezing water, and at last he's found something.
How's it going on your side?
It's going really well. I'm still working my way through the clay layer and I still have bits of charcoal and a bit of gravel to the side.
You're still getting the charcoal then?
Little bits, yes.
Because I mean, I'm getting my first few bits on this side, but I'm getting anywhere near as much as you. So it just shows it must be a very discreet little concentration.
Not earth-shattering, but more definite proof of habitation. Nick's doing slightly better with what looks like an animal tooth and bits of burnt bone. Let's hope the organic materials that are being bagged up will give us even more information about the lifestyle of our as yet mysterious crannog dwellers. Back at the henge, the excavation's progressing well, but with no more obvious structure emerging and no finds, there's a sense of frustration brewing. We have to find some datable artefacts, so we've opened a new trench 30 metres from the henge that could be a prehistoric burial cairn. End of day 2, and it's been a day of real mixed fortunes. Over there on the land side, we haven't come up with any new evidence in any of our trenches. But the crannog has surpassed all expectations. We've found more wood than we could possibly have hoped for. So tomorrow we're going to try and lift some of it in the hope that we can begin to solve the mystery of who built that island and when and what it was used for. Join us after the break. Beginning of day 3 in our quest to find out what was going on here at Loch Migdale hundreds or even thousands of years ago, and so far we've only been partially successful. We know we've got a man-made island and we know we've got a henge, but because we haven't come up with any datable material, we don't know whether we're in the Neolithic or the Bronze Age or even the medieval. So it's time for a council of war. How do we know what period we're in if we've got nothing to date it with?
The thing about henges is they seem to be used as a kind of prehistoric observation platform, and whatever people were doing in them in the Neolithic and Bronze Age, they weren't leaving any objects.
Francis, that's a bit of a dodgy old argument, isn't it? We know it's old because we haven't got any evidence.
No, unusually for archaeology, it's based on common sense, actually. I mean, you wouldn't find a load of kitchen rubbish in a church or a chapel. So, I mean, this does indicate that this was a special place. And the other thing about it is that its shape is very, very characteristic of the sort of small henge-like things you get in the northeast of Scotland. So I'm perfectly happy with it being Neolithic or Bronze Age. In fact, it can't be anything else.
The one place where we have got finds is on the man-made island.
Yeah.
Are we going to be able to date them?
Absolutely, no problem at all. Initially, we know we can get dates from them because we've got at least 50 pieces of timber. Because it's organic, we can get radiocarbon dates.
Yeah, you say that we can get dates for them, but it's not dates we want, it's one solid date, isn't it?
Nick, when we were chatting in the bar the other day, you were saying if it was a crannog, you'd have bucketfuls of finds, masses of finds. Where have we gone?
Well, I think all the timbers and the bracken that we found, the the animals' teeth that we found, tooth and a bit, and the burnt bone and such. I call these finds. You know, I know that you want pretty things, but underwater some things aren't very pretty.
As referee, can I play the sexism card here? Do you really want to find something pretty?
I'd call timbers part of the structure.
We don't know that until we excavate them, because some of them may be actual artifacts, maybe wooden objects. Just because, you know, that we can see the top of them doesn't mean that they are necessarily part of the structure.
Okay, do you think we're going to get anything in the way of retrievable objects that are not part of the built structure?
Yes.
Yesterday, Henry, assisted by the local farmer, found evidence of a causeway on the edge of the loch. Today he's in deep water.
I have to have this.
And having trouble enlisting help.
I don't do surveying, I'm digging.
It's all right. Just think of it as like a very long, thin shovel. It'll be fine.
What happens when the water gets up to here?
Yeah, about there, Phil.
Deeper here, Henry. So you want me to go that way?
Yeah. Take one about there. All right, Phil. Go on another 3 metres or so. Just carry on, you'll be fine.
I think it's deeper here, Henry.
No, keep going, Phil, you'll be fine.
Is that deep enough for you, Henry?
Well, I don't know, let's just see what happens. You just take the next one, you'll be fine.
All right for you, isn't it?
Well,
I'm not going in there. I'm not going in there.
Back.
Despite Phil's problems, the survey appears to show a definite raised area on the loch bed. With the entire trench cleared of silt and debris, it's finally time to start sampling some of the timbers. Unfortunately, this is a destructive process, but it's the only way to get a carbon date. The timbers appear to be in a fantastic state of preservation due to the oxygen-free conditions at 2 metres below.
So you appear to have made quite a mess of my back garden by now.
You asked us here to find out what this monument is. We know it's a henge, and I think we're finding out not only what it is, but why it's here. I think there's some interesting ideas developing, aren't there, Alison?
Yes,
Go on.
I'm really interested in the location and the orientation of this site, because as you can see, it's in a very striking landscape location, and if you look there along the loch, the way that the hills are going forms a perfect notch. And what they've found is that the entranceway is really narrow, and what we need to do is to measure across and see where the exact centre of the site is, and then see whether you get a significant alignment from the centre through the entrance.
Do you mind holding a ranging rod for us, Cara?
Okay.
Ranging rod.
Things are about to take a turn from the archaeological to the astronomical.
And if we measure from the the centre of the bank, Alison.
Right, that's 9 metres 50, 475, right? Okay, I've got that here.
We're trying to find a significant alignment between the centre of the henge, the entrance and the notch. But first, they've got to find the centre spot.
I reckon this is about the middle here and...
Just, yeah, that's fine, Alison.
Oh, goodness. 475, and that's exactly where I am.
Come and have a look at this.
Oh.
What do you reckon to that?
God.
Francis, could you just stand in the centre of the entrance for us?
How's that?
Oh, wow, there you are. He's in the way of the notch.
Is it?
But another thing we need to consider is when people came here, what did they see? And to fully appreciate it, they've actually got to go up there and look at it from sort of a different direction. So this is essentially where people would view it from when they approached it. You can see there with the poles now, you see it pointing straight towards that notch on the skyline?
That's amazing, yeah. It couldn't be much better than that. Yeah.
This has been very carefully chosen. It's a very special place.
To find out which celestial body, sun, moon or star, would have aligned with and nestled in the notch over 4,000 years ago isn't easy. The Earth's constantly, if slowly, moving around its axis as it moves through space. This wobble or precession means that back in the Bronze Age, everything in the sky would have been in a slightly different place.
Phil? You should put the thingy down.
Henry and Phil are still on the trail of their own alignment, but the lining up of their pole isn't so easy.
Well, hang on. Yes!
Yeah, okay, hold it there.
There
How's
it
that
is.
feel? You got it?
It's stone on the bottom there.
Yeah. Right, move on. So, do you reckon we might be getting it there?
Let's see where this next one comes to. Oh, look at that!
Look at that. Right, hold it there.
Got it, quick!
Steady, steady.
Got it?
Yeah, got it.
Henry's hard-won survey shows the remains of a stone causeway that once may have been 2 metres wide and raised half a metre from the loch bed. Either this was a submerged walkway offering defences against invaders, or it was the foundations for a raised wooden walkway long since rotted away. Last evening, we opened a trench on what we thought could have been a prehistoric burial cairn.
Alison, this is turning out to be the 4th monument on our site, isn't it?
Yep.
What have we actually got here, do you think?
Certainly looks like a small curved cairn with the curb going around there and we're standing on it here.
Right, yeah.
And that hollow there looks to be robbing, where somebody's obviously gone to find the treasure or whatever.
So you reckon there was a burial in there which someone's dug into and thrown the stones sort of over there?
That away, yeah. But luckily for us, they missed this one.
You think that's the second burial?
I think it could be. It's a very intriguing cluster of small stones that have been deliberately placed here.
I think we better keep these stones. They might well turn out to be specially selected, so
Yes,
we'll put them to one side.
This isn't going to turn out to be someone's cat, is it?
Hope not.
From 10 years ago.
This possible burial cairn is only 30 metres from our henge, where new features are turning up everywhere.
It's starting to look like a Swiss cheese over here.
It is, but it's a lovely series of stake holes. What we've got is lines of stake holes that would have had wood in them radiating out from the central post. They would have stood probably about this high.
So would these have been little fences or something?
They could have been. There could have been an internal partition within the henge. They're lines radiating out, pointing to distinctive features in the landscape.
Or marking the stars?
Or marking the stars could well have been. We just don't know.
How do you feel about having a ritual astronomical clock in your back garden?
No, I think it's pretty cool.
This is all a bit different.
It's looking a bit nicer now, isn't it? Right smack in the middle of the entranceway, we've got this sort of roughly square pit, and it's filled with stones.
With this gorgeous stone on the side.
This one's nice, isn't it?
Is that been worked? It looks as though it's ridged.
It looks like it's faced down this side, but there's certainly one or two sort of tool marks where it's been rather crudely sort of dressed along this edge.
Could that have fallen? Or do you think that's the position it was in? Or is it
I'd
slipped?
like to think it's fallen. We don't know as yet until we actually had a chance to lift this, but it's quite possible that this fits onto this. And that's actually a broken stump.
Lintel?
Well, it may well, and I say may at this stage, be somewhat upright, actually right in the entranceway. So we could have our first actual standing stone.
When stood up, Miles's stone fits exactly in the centre of the entrance, and its alignment with the Misty Mountains can't be accidental. With the small stones removed from the top of the possible burial, Francis, instead of finding bones, is starting to uncover what looks like a wooden fence post.
When we first hit it, I thought it was modern and it's got a square edge. But actually now that we've got a bit more exposed, I'm rather excited. In fact, I'm extremely excited.
The reason why Francis is so excited is that the wood looks like it's been cleft or split with an axe.
That's the way you work wood if you don't possess saws. And in the Bronze Age, they didn't possess saws, so they had to split their wood.
So if this is a Bronze Age stake, Alison, does this make you think it's something other than a cremation?
It makes me think very hard, yes, because I cannot think of a single example of where you've got a stake above a cremation. So maybe this is the thing that really matters, and this was what was buried under this miniature cairn within a bigger cairn.
The soil around the wooden post is littered with tiny white quartz chips, another sure sign we're in the Bronze Age. Though we don't know what they're for, these hand-chipped mineral pieces may have something to do with ritual purification of the monument.
So you're confident these are man-made?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. And they're very common on sites of this period.
In typical Time Team fashion, it's almost the end of the day and we've got finds everywhere. Now we appear to have a stake to go with our chips.
Is that one of the stakes?
It's not really a stake. It's in some ways more interesting.
Why is it more interesting?
Because it appeared to be set into another piece of wood which is embedded down underneath the organic material. It's about that deep.
So what does that imply?
It implies that it's part of a more complex wooden thing.
But do my eyes deceive me, or are these tool marks on the end?
There are tool marks on the end,
That's
absolutely.
Well done.
Whether there will actually be little signatures on it from the damage in the blade of the axe, I don't know, but there are definitely tool marks on it.
Now fully excavated, it's time to lift the very fragile wooden post.
Okay.
Well done.
That was well done.
Gosh.
And there you are, with one of these quartz chips sticking to it. You can see it's pressed against that. That absolutely mirrors that shape. So it's been squashed on there for thousands of years, and the wood has taken up that shape. So I'm in no doubt whatsoever that we have a piece of 4,000-year-old wood.
I mean, as far as I know, nothing like this has been found in this kind of context in Scotland, ever.
That's absolutely extraordinary. I mean,
isn't it?
I've never dug anything quite as odd as that. I mean, that was just weird. Ah, that's interesting.
The only other items in this trench were two flat pieces of stone, most likely to keep the wood straight and upright. But the mysterious post still had one more secret to reveal. When it was cleaned up, it was found to be made not of wood, but of highly compacted peat. What Francis had excavated was the ghost of a tapered wooden post, which had rotted away, leaving a void which had been filled by the slow deposition of peat.
I think it may be more to do with our marking of significant points in the landscape at significant times of the year than with any funerary thing. We haven't found any cremated bone at all in here. So what they've done is to bury their sacred post.
With all the timbers removed from the crannog, the last job is to replace the large rocks lifted on day one. This is essential to maintain the stability of the archaeology and prevent further erosion. All of the crannog finds are safely on dry land, and it's crunch time.
First thing this morning, we said if there was one thing that we wanted, it was datable evidence, particularly out of the loch.
We've got some sheep's teeth, burnt bone of different sorts in there. I say sheep's teeth, but in fact we've had a look at them. We think it might be deer's teeth.
Possibly.
So we've also got some sheep animal droppings in here, probably sheep droppings, and also there's charcoal, so we know that people were living out there, there's no doubt about that. We also said that there were some small stakes and timbers, and we've sampled some of those. Here's one of them. That's the bottom of it there, and we have cut marks on the end of it. And I think one of the cut marks in particular, in fact the nicest cut mark, which is this one here, is very small, I admit, but it has little striations on it made by damage in the blade of the axe that was used to cut it. But I think that that's a very interesting one.
The cut looks at first glance to be scoop-shaped, and for a moment we all got rather excited because scoop-shaped cut marks are a Bronze Age phenomenon, and no one has ever found a Bronze Age crannog. But the scooping could also be sag, caused when a waterlogged find is exposed to the atmosphere. Which must be what happened, because radiocarbon dates put the timber firmly in the Iron Age, between 100 BC and 100 AD.
And are you happy to say that our henge and our cairn are Bronze Age?
Yep, I think they're Bronze Age. I think they're probably at the other end, the early end of the Bronze Age.
In fact, Alison thinks they're from the very beginning of the Bronze Age, around 2000 BC, which means we've uncovered evidence of 2,000 years of human activity here on Loch Migdale.
I think that that is something that's worth having a dram to.
So what can we now piece together about the prehistoric story of Loch Migdale? Around 2100 BC, a community of people settled and farmed on the land above the loch. For a now long-forgotten reason, they placed some of their most valuable metal possessions in a granite cleft, looking down on their ritual site, a henge, the focal point for what we would now probably call religion. We've calculated that the wooden post at the centre of the henge and the standing stone in the entrance aligned perfectly with the sun as it rose through the notch in the hills at the spring and autumn equinoxes. Almost 2,000 years later, the people of Loch Migdale moved down from their hill farms and built a crannog. Why they built it, how many people lived there and for how long, we'll have to wait for a future excavation.
In the Bronze Age, about 1800 BC, a group of people died here at Leven in Fife. We know that because of these, 8 tiny graves in a small cemetery. But what we don't know is who these people were. Were they members of the same family or of the same tribal group? How did they die? Were they buried with any grave goods? This ancient burial ground is of great archaeological importance, but it's under threat from a building development. Over the next few months, this entire field will be covered in houses. So we've been given the rare opportunity to find out as much as we can about the people who lived and died here nearly 4,000 years ago. And we've got just 3 days to excavate this entire cemetery before the archaeology is lost forever.
Time Team have in the past taken on some ambitious excavations, but here we may have bitten off more than we can chew. Only 3 days to totally excavate each grave, record and remove all of the archaeology before the builders move in. Because the site has to be completely cleared, it offers us a rare opportunity to archaeologically dismantle the graves to find out as much as we can about their structure and occupants. But there's potentially a very big problem. The soil here is very acidic, which means that any skeletal remains and grave goods could have been completely destroyed.
You started without us.
Absolutely. Well, we've not so much started without you. We've actually already evaluated the site, so we've dug it before. We've just actually cleaned up the site again so we can start the excavation proper now.
And where are the actual graves?
Well, you can see quite a few just coming up around us. We've got a grave just here in front of us, one immediately in front of this girl here, and this large boulder you see in the middle probably caps quite an important grave. It's yet to be tested, but it seems likely.
You weren't calling them graves. What was the word you used?
Kist. They're kist burials.
What does that mean?
Well, it's a kind of arrangement of stone slabs forming the edges of the burial, and the burials, the skeletons, or the cremations as they might be, are actually put inside.
How did you find this place originally?
Well, we had a suspicion that there might be some graves in this area, principally because of a chance discovery made back in 1944. So when this area actually came up for development, we thought, aha, there's a good possibility that we're going to find more kists here, so let's have a look. So when we undertook an evaluation here about a month or so ago, as soon as we stripped back the soil, we found the first kist, and then another, then another, then another, and then clearly we realised we were dealing with a cemetery.
This part of eastern Scotland has got a huge amount of Bronze Age activity, each of these dots representing artefacts and single burials. And our site in Leven is possibly the largest Bronze Age cemetery ever found in Scotland. From the previous evaluation, we know of 9 separate kists, and Phil's already nabbed what looks like the best one.
Well, this is quite a moment, Tony, because this is the most complete one we've got. This is the only one that's still got this enormous capstone.
It's really well sealed, isn't it? How are you going to get it off?
Well, we've got to literally reconstruct what they did and dismantle it in reverse. So the last stone that they put in is the first one that we take out. This stone here, for example, you can see it's well and truly on top of the capstone. So that one can come.
It looks very fragile stuff.
It's not very good stone. We must make absolutely sure there's no detail carvings or anything on the undersides of these. But it's very, very rotten. You can see it's very, very laminated. Look, it just, you see it's very, very rotten stone. But obviously did the purpose.
What do we do with this rock? Is it worth holding on to?
Well, obviously, if there was any of it that's got any signs of working on, then we'd keep that. But this stuff, it's just stones, basically.
We'll just chuck it on the spoil heap.
This can all go.
None of the other kists seem to have lids, so we can use different digging strategies for each to try and find out as much as we can about how they were constructed.
What we'd like you to do is to cut a slot on the far side and to try and take out this long stone here, which will give us a view through the kist and a sense of how the kist has been filled in.
Oh, excellent. So we're going to get quite a nice view of the stratigraphy.
Hopefully, hopefully.
At the very centre of the cemetery, leading Bronze Age expert Francis Pryor has already started digging around the mysterious rock.
This is an incredible looking thing you've got here. It looks so significant. Is it just a coincidence?
No, I think this is the heart of the site. I mean, forget all those graves and things. I mean, this large lump of rock is the key to it all.
What do you think it might be?
Well, we'll know that when we've dug out the pit into which it was sunk, which I've marked out with my trowel.
So let's have a look. The pit goes all the way around here.
All the way around, yeah. That's it, and then we pick it up here.
So you think the pit was dug first and then this was put into it, so it wasn't here when the first burials were done?
Well, what I would like is that the pit is much earlier than the burials, and that this was a sacred site for centuries before they started coming here with the burials. That would be lovely, because it would show that this particular bit of land had always been important.
So might this even be Stone Age?
Well, it could, yeah, it could be. Yes, why not?
And there might actually be a body under there.
Oh, that would be lovely, wouldn't it?
There could be something, though.
Oh, there could be, yeah, there could be. Just depends how deep it goes, and we don't know how far that rock's going to go.
And what's this here?
Well, that is a spread of burning. There's a lot of burning on the site. And what's fascinating about that is that the burning there is cut by the pit.
So what does that mean?
That means that the burning has got to be earlier than the pit. I reckon there's something strange going on here. Maybe they were cleansing the site in some way. You know, maybe there were trees here and they had to be burned and sort of disposed of in the correct way.
Because there are lots of patches of this burning all over the place, aren't there?
215.
Geophys are conducting a magnetic susceptibility survey, which should, by measuring variations in magnetism in the ground, prove whether these black areas are indeed burning.
215.
Even though the 9 kists were only discovered a month ago, this field has turned up Bronze Age archaeology in the recent past.
When did your dad discover the first kist?
In early 1944, when a plough nicked the top of one of the covering stones.
And you saw it?
Yep. I was brought down at the age of 5.
So it's a little time ago.
A little bit ago, but I was I'm rather hazy about what I saw. I do remember seeing one of the kists opened. No, it wasn't being opened, it had already been opened, but there were 4 red sandstone sides to it.
How long after your dad discovered it was it actually excavated?
It was found in January, and the excavation happened in June.
So what happened to the site between the beginning of the year and July?
It was left open. It's quite possible some of the artefacts had disappeared. But when the excavation eventually took place, they found a black jet bead and some bones.
The bones were analysed and found to belong to a 12-year-old boy. Quite why he was buried with a necklace made of Yorkshire jet, and obviously highly prized, we'll never know. We should be able to find whatever remains of his grave somewhere in our cemetery. Alice is excavating 2 small kists to the east of the big stone. Could they also be the graves of children?
You're well underway, and I think we probably need to pause and take stock, because this is not quite what we expected. It looks to me a little bit as if we've got the natural subsoil already showing through here.
There's a definite change. I come down on this and it's sort of quite sandy.
I mean, one possibility that occurs to me, given how small the kist is that it might actually be a cremation with the bone well burnt.
I think the sides were obviously a lot higher than what they are now. I think this was actually probably part of the side. It was lying flat on top of the grave, but I think it's probably part of that side that's sort of been knocked sideways.
I think a good thing to do at this stage would be to have a general clean-up, not just inside, but actually around the edge as well, and to bring up the cut into which the stones of the kist have been laid.
It's disappointing that these 2 kists turn out to be empty, their stone slabs probably trashed by centuries of ploughing. They could be cremations, or perhaps they contain the remains of tiny babies, the bones being completely destroyed by the acid soil.
You kind of get the impression that underneath all this there ought to be a big void, don't you? You know what I mean? And you kind of you just lift the capstone off, and there is this kind of thing underneath, this empty tomb with a body or something like that underneath.
But the reality is it's much more likely, presumably, just to be down on Earth.
The reality is it's going to be filled up with dirt. Yeah.
On the other side of the cemetery, Kat successfully excavated around one of the side slabs of her kist. It's time to see if the application of a little brute force can shift it.
Yeah. And you're going to work the stone free from the other side?
Yeah.
OK.
Go on, that'll go easily. There you go.
Oh, it's going. Yep. Very nice. And we've saved the section. It's all there. Lovely job.
And it's intact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
With the side stone removed, Kat will be able to clean up the section to try and understand how the kist filled up with earth, covering whoever and whatever was buried inside.
So, Francis, this looks very promising.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this. It looks like sandstone, doesn't it?
Well, I think that's what we've been waiting for all afternoon here. We've been wondering what this large stone's about, and I think you've just got the answer here. I would be extremely surprised if that's not the side stones of a kist coming up now there. I think we've got the grave underneath this that we all thought might be here, but certainly your work there in the last few minutes, I think it's just sealed that one.
Yeah. It does seem very flat at the bottom of that stone, which again fits in with what you...
It does indeed.
This is cracking, isn't it?
It's also such a sizable cut, you know, it's a good 2 to 3 times the size of any of the other graves on this side. So I'm assuming, being the central focus as well, this is the most important part, possibly.
This will be the big cheese?
I think we'd have to conclude that at this early stage.
So the giant stone seems to be sitting on top of soil, which is on top of a large red sandstone kist.
You got it? Now let me put mine in.
It's finally time to lift the lid off Phil's grave.
Yeah.
Just look. It's rotten. That's better. That's better. That's better. Now, all we got to do is try and slide this up. Reckon we can do it, Carrie? Okay. That's it. Fingers. Well done. Oh, look at that. Oh, God, look at that black.
Does that look like burning to you?
Yeah. Hell of a lot.
More dark soil. But this time on the inside of the kist. Could this be ritual cleansing of the cemetery as well?
Just see if that's burned, Phil.
Do you want me out of the way?
No, you're okay. Where you've got something that's highly fired, you get really high readings, and that's giving average readings, if not low. Suggests to me that's not actually burning.
So in other words,
that's just a
some sort
organic residue below the stone.
Okay.
So if it's not burning, what is it? We're going to take samples for lab analysis.
It's the end of day one, and I don't think I've ever seen so many of our archaeologists working on their own on a site. They've each been allocated their own grave, and they know they're really up against it for time now to see if they can work out over the next 2 days what's buried down there, and also to see if they can understand what's underneath that mysterious stone right in the middle of the cemetery. Join us after the break. Beginning of day 2 at our amazing Bronze Age burial site here at Leven in Scotland, and the big news is that already this morning this beautiful rim of some kind of Bronze Age pot has been uncovered. That's not all though. Behind us, cats beavering away in a grave over there. Alice is excavating this one down here. In about an hour we're going to lift the stone right in the middle of the cemetery. We hope to find something intriguing under there. We've got 1, 2, 3 more graves here. The whole thing is riddled with potential, Phil. Have you got anything at all in your grave yet?
Of course I have, Tony. I am so chuffed. I've actually just got our first bit of human bone. I've actually got down onto the skull.
Where is it?
There it is, just poking out of the section there. It's not in very good condition, but the main thing is I've actually got human remains in these graves. Until you find it, you don't actually know whether the soil conditions would have destroyed all the bone completely. Now we know we've got bone in this one, we could have bone in all the rest of them.
Margaret, it's a very small grave. Is this a child?
Not necessarily. It could be a child, of course, but it could be an adult in a crouched position. Phil needs to finish off before we can know.
How long till we know?
Well, I've recorded the section, we want to sample it, and then I can take the rest out, and then I go down on top of the burial.
How long?
Well, go away and I'll tell you, it will speed me up.
Give us a shout when you've got something.
As Kerry cleans back around the pot in his kist, he starts to uncover a skull and possibly some grave goods.
Phil, do you want to come and have a look at this? I've got some flint.
Flint?
Flint.
Oh, wow, I'll have a look at the flint.
Got this on the opposite side to the vessel here.
Good God. God, that is gorgeous. I mean, not only is it gorgeous as a tool, I mean, it's a beautiful big long blade that's been retouched along the edge as a knife. But the thing that really knocks me sideways is the quality of the raw material. I mean, you don't get flint like that up here. Douglas, where's your nearest source of flint from here?
Well, certainly we've got nothing of the quality of this kind of flint around here. There's nothing like that in Scotland. I mean, this is possibly Yorkshire, Norfolk, something like that, but it's certainly travelled a long way to get here.
I tell you what, even in England, it's rare to get raw material of that quality. That is the most efficient tool you're likely to get. And you can have it, like, just hold it like that, or you could slot it into a wooden handle or something, glue it in there. It's the most gorgeous thing.
Absolutely, but look at the context. We've got a particularly high status burial here. I mean, this food vessel with a package there with a flint knife, an extraordinarily rare find indeed.
I'll tell you what, when I go, you can put me down with one of these. I'll be gone. God.
See the target ahead, Francis?
Oh, yeah.
A few hundred metres to the north of our site, there's more Bronze Age archaeology, which could be evidence of some sort of settlement.
It's like a good standing stone, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
It's only the top of what it used to be. Used to
Really?
be twice as high.
Oh, really?
Really?
Yes, it'd been knocked down, I think, probably in about the 40s or so.
Yes, I mean, an awful lot of effort went into putting this up. I mean, imagine it twice the size. You know, I mean, you're talking about possibly, you know, dozens, maybe hundreds of people coming here to do that. It's a major bit of communal work, I think.
Yeah.
And I think it was there for a purpose, and I think the best purpose is that it's territory. You know, we're on this side, you're on that side. We're probably very good friends, but you know, the landscape's got to be parcelled up, hasn't it?
In the same field as the standing stone, Peter's found several small stone objects that he'd like identified.
I was wondering if that was possibly extremely old.
It is. I think it's extremely old. Yeah. It's the way that hole's been made. As you can see, you can put your finger through it, but it's been cut from both sides, drilled from both sides, like an hourglass. I think that's possibly a mace head or something like that. Certainly prehistoric.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And this thing has caught my eye. If you actually look at it, it's very, very smooth there. If you'd like to feel that, can you?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that was used as a corn grinding stone, the top stone of a quern. You went backwards and forwards, leaning down on it, and that's what smooths that surface.
This, to me, looks to be a rather exciting find. You see, this one's got the hole in the top, Peter, as well, this sort of cup that's cut in here, but it's not been dressed anyway. It's not smooth like the one you've got there, Francis. I think this is portable rock art. Prehistoric rock art. So in the upland zones, there's many examples of what's called cup and ring art. They're small hollows cut into the surfaces of rocks and stones. And in some cases, you get them on portable stones, literally just one cup. And that can then be deposited either with a burial or in a field boundary, some kind of symbol that can be put in the ground. I think that's rather an exciting find.
Fascinating.
You know, there's one thing that intrigues me almost as much as the graves, and that's these mysterious patches of black that are coming up all over the site. Are they burning, John?
Well, they are burning. They are burnt, but they're not really what we're looking for.
What do you mean?
Well, we're looking for fired areas.
Like pyres?
Pyres, that's it.
Yeah.
And they give really strong magnetic responses like that.
So we've got one?
No, we haven't. That's actually the igneous rock in the middle of the site. I mean, it's the same effect, but it's natural.
So does that mean that at some time there was some kind of sacrificial burning on that stone?
No, that's the built-in magnetism. When it was a molten rock, it was really high temperatures, and when it's sort of solidified, then it's retained its magnetism, and that's why it's a strong signal.
So it's perfectly natural, so we haven't got any pyres on this site?
No pyres at all. And when you actually look at where the kists are, near to the kists, you get these areas of yellow, areas of burning. And they're one-off events, though.
So would you speculate that what it means is that as each person was buried, there was some sort of fire process associated with that?
Yes, I mean, it's possible there are cremations on the site and then we're not really seeing the bone. It's possible there's funerary feasting, which is represented by fires, and they're one-offs. It's possible there are burnt offerings associated with the burial process, but they're all pretty small-scale fires. That's what the evidence is suggesting.
What we do know is that there wasn't one kind of ritual place where bodies were burned.
Well, the one big uncertainty about the evidence that's coming from the MagSus, it seems to me, is this impression that we're getting that underlying all of the burials is this great big burnt event, which doesn't seem to be showing up at all. This is Francis's idea, that you've got this sort of ritual cleansing by fire, and we're certainly seeing our kists and our mounds going in on top of that right the way across the site, but that's not showing up on this survey.
So that's pure speculation.
It is, there's a lot of speculation in that, yeah.
The bones in Kerry's kist are fragmentary, but the skull gives Margaret all the information she needs.
We've got the skull of a very small child or a baby.
Now that looks to me like an adult skull.
No, what you've got is with young skulls, because the sutures are unfused, as soon as everything decomposes, they fall apart, and the pressure of the soil just pushes them flat against the soil.
How do you know that's a baby and not
bigger.
an adult?
It's very, very thin. The sort of texture of the bone, the configuration of the bone suggests it's somebody who's very young.
Another child's grave, the second on the site if you include the 1944 excavation, the third or fourth if you include Alice's tiny kists yesterday.
Over in Cat's Trench here, is this another burial?
Well, what we've got here, which is really interesting, is some cremated material coming at the fill, but it is cremated bone and it's probably human. But what's very, very interesting about it is you've actually got marks on it. You've got these series of horizontal cuts going across it. Initially I thought maybe they were the marks you get when bone fractures during cremation, but they're not. They're the wrong shape, they're too even, too uniform. So something was done to that bone before cremation, which is rather strange, because if they'd been defleshing, then the bone wouldn't cremate, because you'd never get the thing to a high enough temperature. Part of the cremation process relies on the body catching fire and then continuing to burn, literally under its own steam.
So have you any idea what might have caused those marks?
No. I mean, they're obviously caused by some sort of processing, but it just seems slightly odd that they're also cremated.
The idea of body processing could very well tie in with Neil's speculation about burial rituals, which in addition to fires or feasting, may now have to include deliberate defleshing.
2:30, day 2. We're well on the way to having excavated all our tiny little graves, but now, the moment that we've all been waiting for, we're going to shift the big stone in the middle of the cemetery, so everyone's going to have to clear out the way. Alice, can you clear now? Cat! We're moving this in now. Jim, can you clear?
Stop. Hold it, Dennis. Try that. You get a plank under there, Tony?
It's got to come higher.
Don't come much higher than that.
It's got to come higher.
That's
it. That's it.
That's it.
Okay.
Right, we get some straps on. 1, 2, 3. There we go. Okay. Whoa.
That's for you two.
Okay, watch out that bloody thing drops. Get the planks away.
We know from yesterday that below the oddly shaped capstone, there's at least a foot of soil above the kist. The digger's priority is to remove the soil as quickly as possible so we can get an idea of the scale of the obviously huge red sandstone lid. Kerry's kist has been recorded. It's time to lift the grave goods.
That's a beauty. That's wonderful. Well, it's a Yorkshire vase food vessel, and it's actually very, very similar to one of the ones that was found in the evaluation. So if I hold this beside it, you can see it's the same shape, it's the same twisted cord impressions, and this is very exciting because one of our issues is to see whether we can identify the work of individual potters. Yeah, see if this is a twin pot. Were they made by the same person? Were the people buried at the same time?
Post-excavation analysis seems to indicate that the two pots were indeed made to the same design by the same potter in 2100 BC. As Kerry removes the remains of the child's skeleton, a small find comes to light among the teeth.
Wow, so this bead.
It's really exciting, isn't it?
Amazing. I mean, it certainly isn't one of these barrel-shaped or oval jet beads.
Yeah.
And I wonder very much what it's made of. I don't think we'll be able to tell until Dana has had a look at it, cleaned it up, and looked at it under the microscope. And it certainly feels like stone to me. But it's very interesting, and it's nice that you found it in situ under the so it's a necklace rather than a bracelet, bead, or whatever. So that's great. So just find me a few more, will you?
Place your order here.
This is an extraordinarily rich grave for a child, with a flint knife, bead and decorated pot. So as not to miss these very small finds, every bit of spoil from every kist is being sieved, and odd things are turning up everywhere.
and you kind of think to yourself, is that a stone with a groove in it? Well, it is a stone with a groove in it, but I mean, it is incredibly polished, isn't it?
It's some sort of little tool, or it was used in a workshop for making something.
In the incident room, we've set up a small conservation lab where Dana can get to work on the finds. Firstly, to sample the contents of the pot from Kerry's kist. If it contained food or drink, lab analysis may be able to differentiate mead from beer or meat from vegetable matter. She then starts on the supposed bead to find out how it was made.
I've cleaned it from each end and it is hollow, so I guess it was a bead, eh?
Great, that's fantastic. Wow.
Yeah.
But it looks as if it's quite uneven inside, as if it's... Yeah.
I don't see any evidence of drilling.
Nope.
So I think it's natural, isn't it?
It's a natural freak that's been used as an amulet. That's great, and that's similar to this other stone.
Yeah. So we've got this in two different kists, unusual stones. I mean, one uses jewellery, and this one which seems to be perhaps just carried around, or...
Yeah, well, I think the shine that you get on that, I suspect it's been on somebody's body, or in a pouch, and it's a treasured amulet, a good luck charm.
I mean, it's been suggested it's a fertility symbol.
Yeah,
what do
why
you
not?
think?
Yeah, I was
Well, it's as good a theory as any, I suppose. Back on site, Phil's ready to lift his skull, but it requires careful wrapping first. What kind of things are you hoping are preserved?
Well, it would be really nice if there's some teeth, then we can get an age done, and possibly any evidence of disease or anything. But at the moment, it doesn't even look as though we can determine sex. It's in such poor condition, which is why we need to hang on to every scrap of evidence that we've got.
And there's been no other bone that's come out apart from this?
Not a scrap, no. This is all we've had. And I suppose it does raise the sort of question, in Kerry's grave, we've only got skull as well.
They've been assuming that the other bones have rotted away. Is there the possibility that they only buried the skulls?
I think you have to sort of, if this happens, I think again, then we have to actually wonder why. The thing with Phil's is it's in such appalling condition, it's more than plausible that everything else could have completely dissolved and gone. But the bone that we do have in Kerry's grave is in really good condition on the skull, and yet there's absolutely nothing else, and that's a little bit odd.
There's a number of mysteries coming out of these graves,
there
aren't
are
there?
actually, there really are.
Quite weighty, I'll tell you that.
Due to the higher density of bones in the human skull, they tend to survive the burial environment much better than any of the other 200-odd bones in the human skeleton.
Yeah. Just pack it back round.
Pack it round there.
But with no other bones to work with, the skull is our only chance to find out the age and sex of the burial.
Dana, something for you. From you. It must be something bone-like. It's Yorick. It's the skull from Phil's trench, and it's in such poor condition that we've just lifted it in a block, and it needs dismantling so that we have as much bone in one piece as possible, if that's possible. Okay, let's have a go. No bone, no teeth. No bone, no teeth.
Disappointingly, there's so little of the bone left that there's no way of knowing whether this is the skull of an adult or child, man or woman. Back on site, a very rare sight, Geophys doing manual work. With their mag survey complete, they've been given the job of trying to find out if there's a perimeter ditch running round the edge of our cemetery. All day long, while we've been working on these fascinating burials and excavating these beautiful pots and skulls and little bits of tooth, we've thought that maybe deep in the heart of this cemetery there would be something special, something very important. But we could never have guessed that it would be as significant and as beautiful as this. This is either one of the biggest Bronze Age kists ever discovered in the country, or else it's something far, far older, possibly even Stone Age. And the answer to what it is lies down here somewhere. If you're not doing anything after the break, please join us.
Beginning of day 3, we all got here early because we've got to finish the excavation of this Bronze Age cemetery by tonight. We were all really excited about the possibility of lifting these red stones to see what might be underneath. But everything's changed. We've got these 2 parallel blue lines right the way through the site. Francis has moved away from the stones. Phil's come across here from the other end of the site. What's going on, Francis?
Well, we realised at the last minute that central grave, as we thought it was, isn't central. We found a ring ditch goes around the outside. That central grave is off-centre, so it can't be the main focus of the site.
But we thought the stones were at the centre of the site. Where is the centre?
The centre is over there. Follow the blue strings.
Yeah.
The centre is about here. So what we're doing, we're putting a trench right through the centre of the mound, okay? Hopefully we'll find a central grave if there is one. Then we'll understand the site. Right now we're circling around in a great mass of mound.
One small question. We've got something like 9 graves to excavate.
Yeah.
You've now put in this massive trench.
Yeah.
We've got to have this whole site excavated by the end of the day. Can we possibly do it?
Well, I think it's going to be a tall order. I think it's going to be a very tall order.
Henry? Francis has just changed our entire strategy because he thinks the centre of the cemetery isn't where we thought it was, and also because he says that he reckons there's a ditch all the way round it. Is he right?
Well, we've seen the ditch on this side, and I've surveyed that in along this edge. Now, if you sort of extend that into a full circle, they place the centre of that circle somewhere around about here.
Do you buy this as a model for a Bronze Age cemetery?
Well, I do, because there are many examples of cemeteries like this, which you've got an area surrounded by a ditch. And interestingly, if you look at the definition that Henry's put around this, all the kists that we've got are within that circle. So I think, to me, that's a fairly good indicator. We've actually got the limits of this cemetery.
Around the big kist, there's a definite sense of anticipation. Everyone wants to see what lies beneath. But when you're dealing with large stone blocks that could collapse at any time and destroy the delicate remains below, you just can't rush.
In the middle there, is that a separate stone?
Yes, this looks like a locking stone.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, it's sort of wedging the 2 stones together and keeping the seal, keeping what's in here. And, you know, the whole of this crack that we've got here between the 2 stones was actually sealed together, which is why we've got this problem of some stuff in danger of falling in.
Yeah.
This one looks as if it's going to come away quite cleanly. My worry is there might be something underneath that's going to drop away as we do it, so I want to clean it quite carefully.
Some bits of very modern looking material in there as well that are shining, almost like tinfoil or plastic
make sure
or
this is all
something.
part of the same.
Which is weird because they had the capping stone on top, so how could that have got in there? Doesn't make sense, does it?
Could it be modern or could it just be old and it's caught the light?
Tantalising.
Okay. Let's see if
this logic doesn't bite you.
Thank you for that, John.
Rooty.
What that is.
That's what's shining, Margaret.
So it is plastic, isn't it?
It's a nest, isn't it?
Oh, so rodents have introduced that then? That's what we were seeing. Extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah.
How on earth rodents could get into a stone-lined tomb buried a metre below remains to be seen. Before we can lift the stone, we've got loads to do. The trench is extended so we can get the heavy lifting gear in, and the weather's not helping. Bubble wrap has been fed down the crack in the lid to protect against any possible rockfall, and padding is wrapped around the stone before the lifting straps are attached. It's more like heavy engineering than archaeology. The lifting of this huge stone is using up a lot of manpower and resources. It's almost 4 o'clock and we've still got 4 kists to excavate. A few metres away from our big kist, Kat has at last found some archaeology in an otherwise empty grave.
I've got a pot.
Is it the same as the other one?
No, it's slightly different. Kerry's was very ornate and ours is just very, very plain. Also, it's badly damaged along this side, which is a shame.
Do you reckon these would have been pots which were specifically thrown in order to be part of the funeral, or would these just have been the ordinary pots from the kitchen that would have been put in with the buried person?
It's a very good question, and it's something that we can't really be sure about. However, my own feeling is it's likely that these pots had a function out with the actual burial tradition, but then were given over completely to use here, though we do see very similar styles in graves.
Is there any particular form for the location of the pot within the grave?
Well, there is a tendency to have the pot located close to the head, so usually that's the case, but equally right in the middle of the grave at one side is also quite a common find, but it's usually at the middle or at the head.
So we've got no head.
No head as yet.
But
obviously this grave did contain a body, but it's just probably as a result of the soil conditions that the bone is almost completely gone.
It looks like Francis's idea to open a trench across the cemetery is paying dividends. Phil's already found what looks like a pile of bones.
All of a sudden, cremated bone.
Cremated bone, you're right, yeah. And human at that, I'm sure, yeah.
And of course, I mean, you know, this may not be, I don't know, it may not be a high status burial, it may not be associated with wonderful pots and beautiful objects, but nonetheless it's still a human being.
A human being, absolutely.
Still somebody who died
from
and
way back with a
that's
history.
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not all good news. At least 4 of the kists we've excavated have been completely empty or badly damaged. A probable combination of acid soil and centuries of being trashed by ploughing.
At last we're ready to lift the smaller of the 2 big stones. We've done everything we can to ensure that nothing falls into the grave, but we can't be absolutely sure. We've only got a few hours left.
Lift it clear. Lift it clear.
Can we see what we've got now?
Yeah, let's lift the wood out and see what's there.
Which way to take it?
Take it this way. Okay, towards you, Tony.
Do watch that crack.
We're going to have to be very, very gentle because as we lift the bubble wrap off, we want to make sure we don't dislodge anything that's in situ. So, yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh my goodness.
Look at that.
Wow.
Margaret, come and have a look.
It's wonderful, isn't it? I've not seen any bone like this on this site so far.
Tell us what you can see.
Well, we've got the skull and it's lying on the top with the top of the head down. The bottom of the skull and the maxilla, the upper jaw's all gone and most of the nose, but a little bit of the nose still survives, and the frontal region, the eye sockets still survive. So that's really, really good. So we might be able to determine sex by that if we don't get anything else. If we're lucky, the jaw will have fallen off somewhere and be amongst this, which will help us age as well. But here we've got the upper leg bones and the lower leg bones, which suggests the pelvis is over there. These are the knees. It's a crouch burial, which is what you'd expect in this type of funerary environment.
A crouch burial just means that
somebody's buried on their side with their legs tucked up in front of them and arms probably tucked up as well.
There seem to be lots of little shiny bits in there. What on earth could they be?
Well, we found the remnants of what looked like a rodent's nest, and I think, you know, a mouse or something's gone in and taken plastic in with it.
So even though this has been sealed up for 4,000 years or more, rodents have managed to get their way down into it.
So we're not the first living things to have seen inside this tomb after all. But
even though we're the first humans.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, the bone survival is absolutely brilliant compared with what we've got elsewhere.
Neil, what do we do with it now?
Well, it's going to have to be cleaned. We've had a little bit of debris go in. We're going to have to clean very, very carefully indeed, because not only have we got bone in situ, we've also almost certainly got some grave goods in situ too. So very, very gentle, sensitive cleaning.
Oh, you really think there's a good chance that we'll have grave goods here?
I'd be very surprised if there wasn't in a grave of this grandeur.
I think it's a man as well. I'm just feeling this. It feels like there are good brow ridges. I think it's probably a man.
Before we can excavate the contents of the kist, there's the small matter of the other stone, which is absolutely rotten and has to be removed by hand.
I have to do this, that's fine.
Look at that. Perfect.
A few metres from our big kist, Alice has been quietly working on a small burial which seems to contain grave goods and the best preserved skeletal remains we've found so far.
Got a nice lot of teeth, Alice. Is there enough to give us a good age?
Yes, yeah. We've got quite a few molars here.
Is that the 6?
Yeah, that's the first molar, and there's a little bit of wear on a couple of the cusps there. But that's the 3rd molar, and the crown is complete. So that sort of suggests early teens, I think.
Yeah, well, at least 12 anyway, isn't it? So
yeah.
that's good. I mean, can we tighten that up? What's going on with the pelvis? Is that fused?
Yes, well, I'm really pleased about this because I thought the pelvis was going to be really fragmentary. You had this little bit of it here, which doesn't really tell us much at all. But coming down onto the right part of the pelvis here, we've got a lump of the pubis.
There's a lump as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's an unfused epiphysis. So
that's pre-puberty then, isn't it?
Yeah.
So somebody between sort of 12 and 14-ish?
Yeah.
Which is really, really nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
great.
It's brilliant.
Really good.
Amazingly, another child burial. The makeup of this cemetery is very odd and very rare for the Bronze Age. One adult male in a graveyard of children. Maybe the position of the cemetery in the landscape holds some clues.
Stuart, why am I at the top of this tower?
Well, I think from here, Francis, you can get a very good idea of the cemetery in relation to the landscape around it.
Yeah, you can see the sea over there, look. You really do get a feeling for the shape of the landscape.
You do, don't you?
And they put this thing here for a reason, didn't they?
That's right. I think we can now start to appreciate why this cemetery is where it is. I've been looking at where the other prehistoric sites are in the vicinity. You can see these red dots are where there are kist cemeteries. You can see how they're all next to river valleys.
Yeah.
Here, our cemetery here is next to this big valley over here.
And that's that one there.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think what we should be looking at here is a community, a settlement over here, and a cemetery here next to this river valley on the edge of their territory, as it were.
Yeah.
Much like Leven today. And we can see from here, we can see Leven and we can see the churches in the background.
Yeah.
This is almost the precursor of modern Leven.
In other words, the chap underneath that massive kist that I revealed last night, he's probably not a sort of big chieftain or a king or something like that. He's much more the equivalent of the local mayor. Or
I think that's a good analogy, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
There's definitely a male. Look at those brow ridges. One of the slightly unnerving things about this is that it looks as though you've actually got blood vessels still on the inside of the skull, but in fact they're rootlets. And of course they're really destructive because they leach mineral out of the bone and destroy it. They're all over the outside as well. Can you see here? Very, very tiny, fine roots, almost like hair on the outside of the bone.
But is this where the rats or the rodents have been nibbling?
Yeah. What we've had here is, rats nesting in the grave and probably in the skull itself. And the young rats, and possibly the older ones as well, will have been sharpening their teeth on the bone. And you've got some lovely examples of teeth marks all around here, for example.
Is it very common to see rats nesting in the way that they've been here?
Well, it's the sort of thing you imagine from some 19th century Gothic novels, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I've actually never ever seen a burial that's been thrown into such complete disarray by the activity of rodents. But there's bone being moved all over the place, bits of skull, quite well dispersed from where the remains of the skull were lying. And the skull itself has been moved and turned over by these rats.
They've been playing football down there,
They've been
haven't
having a great time down there, and as a consequence, we haven't got much left of our chap, which is a great, great shame.
It's 6 o'clock and we're rapidly running out of time. The ambitious trench across the centre of the site has to be abandoned without finding a central burial. We have to put all our manpower into excavating, recording and lifting any remaining grave goods and skeletal remains. Then the stone slabs have to be removed. We've learnt a huge amount from excavating this cemetery, and we've finally got the answer to a question that's been bothering us since day one. Are the black patches areas of burning? The answer's more geological than archaeological. Some of the patches are charcoal, but the rest, the stuff that Francis thought was ritual cleansing, is in fact degraded, bad quality coal outcrops, common in this part of Scotland. No wonder they didn't give Geophys a signal. Finally, after all of the bones are removed, it becomes apparent how and where the rats gained entry. But one mystery remains. Why, in a burial of this grandeur, are there no grave goods? Perhaps our theories of what constitutes high status need to be revised. Maybe pottery, imported flint and jet, jewellery and weapons were everyday objects in the Scottish Bronze Age, and it was natural, organic things that were highly prized. Perhaps the occupant of our main burial was wrapped in furs and surrounded by leather and wooden objects, which unfortunately haven't survived. Douglas Spears and his team were later able to complete Francis's trench and in the process discovered a central kist, just where Francis said it would be. It turned out to be the burial of the boy with the jet necklace first found in 1944. He was the first person buried here around 2100 BC. Shortly after that, at least 4 other children were buried along with the middle-aged man under the domed capstone. Quite what relationship he had to the children we'll never know, and why he merited such an impressive grave marker has been lost by the passage of 4,000 years.
I'm in the Cambridgeshire Fenlands. This is the new Millennium Cycle Path, and right here it's going to cut through one of the most important Bronze Age sites in Europe, Flag Fen. 3,500 years ago, a walkway ran from the mainland over there right through to an island over there. But this wasn't any old walkway. When they excavated that end, they found hundreds of bronze objects deposited in the water. So what happened at this end where the walkway met the island? Could this be another place where we'll find lots of bronze objects? And what's its connection with the Barrows over there on that tree line, one of which I'm pleased to say we're going to be able to excavate? Quite a lot to do in just 3 days. Francis, what was this walkway? What was it for?
Well, it was much more than a walkway. It was a way across the fen, but it was also a barrier, it was a defensive wall, and it was a place where people offered the most incredibly valuable items into the waters.
But if we don't find any of these valuable objects, then all we're going to be excavating this week is sodden wood, isn't it?
No, because it's much more important and exciting than that, because most of the archaeological evidence for the past, probably over 90%, is made of things like wood and leather, and it just rots away, and we never find any evidence of it. So when we actually get preserved wood, it's tremendously important. It tells us about the wood they're using, the woodworking techniques. We might get a dendro date, tells us about where they're managing the forests and all the rest of it. So it's fantastically important.
And are we sure that it goes in this direction?
Well, you've got it in the preservation hall excavated there, haven't you?
Yeah.
And you found bits of it under the cycleway.
Yeah, just little scraps, post holes.
So that means that where we are now, we're actually walking along it.
This way. Yeah.
What would there have been on either side?
For that side.
The wooden trackway ran across the low-lying fenland which flooded in the wintertime, forming an island. These oak posts are the remnants of this trackway. They were driven into the ground more than 3,000 years ago, and now they're being conserved inside this preservation building. By measuring the distance from the edge of the building to the centre of the posts, our landscape surveyors can find exactly where the posts continue outside. In this way, they can help Francis place a trench right over the trackway.
Well, we want to head towards the dry island. Now, when we find the posts in that cycleway slot, We marked the centre of where we got the holes with a bit of red and white hazard tape. You can see on that post. Can you see it?
I can see it,
on the fence post.
Yeah.
So if you keep me on the right line, I'll stop when I think we're nice and wet.
Okay. You decide where you want your hole, and then I'll...
About here. It's a bit of a dip.
Okay. Come back slowly. Bit more. Keep coming. That's it.
Right.
That's the line.
Oh, God, it's hard.
Does the trackway still exist here, though? If it does, then Trench 1 should come down onto preserved wood and confirm that the trackway continues in this direction towards the island. But what was the relationship between the trackway and the round barrow further up the slope on the dry ground on Northey Island? Were they being used at the same time?
We are so lucky.
What is a round barrow?
It's a Bronze Age burial mound, and it literally would have been a mound of dirt. I mean, now it's ploughed completely flat, so you hardly see it. But the fact is that it's going to be there, and whoever was buried inside was probably somebody of pretty good status.
So do we think that the people who were buried in those barrows could have been connected in some way to the walkway?
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, I have a pet theory here. And my pet theory is that those barrows were in effect the houses of the dead on an island of the dead.
I'm convinced, aren't you?
Yeah.
So when are we going to start digging?
Now.
At this stage, nobody can be sure that this is actually a round barrow. But this aerial photograph certainly does show a circular feature which has been partially cut off by the road. It seems clear in this photograph. But how does it look on the ground?
Mick?
Yeah.
Where's the barrow?
Here, in front of us, is where it actually is.
Where?
We're basically standing on it.
But this is lower than the road. There's nothing here.
It's been pretty ploughed out, hasn't it?
So how do we know there was ever anything here at all?
Well, we had the aerial photographic evidence which showed that there was a semicircular feature basically around about here. We've actually come in earlier and actually done a little bit of survey work. And can you see in there the really nice, weak semicircular anomaly? Can you see that?
But you see, look, also right in the middle is this dark area. And that could be the primary burial. It could be an inhumation or it could be a cremation.
But we'd expect other burials, these secondary satellite burials, later probably out in this sort of area here. And these later ones might be more the sort of date of our timber work down there.
So how big is this thing?
Well, it's about 20 metres, I guess. I mean, well, let's actually mark it out. Come on then. We're about in the right place here, Tony, so follow me around. Okay?
Like the Pied Piper in
Bradford,
yeah.
It's
quite big, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
On, Tony, back there, right. Stop there. You're the central burial.
Very good.
Yeah, that's it.
That is.
Yeah, OK. Hold it like that. We'll bring a digger in and fill it up.
I want some grave goods, please.
Phil will have to dig Trench 2 from the centre of the barrow and make it long enough to locate the outer ring ditch. This may not be as simple as it sounds. Stuart and Bernard, meanwhile, are trying to make some sense of the surrounding area. If this was an island of the dead, as Francis thinks it was, then we need to find out if people were living here and how they were using the land 3,000 to 4,000 years ago.
This is where we are at the moment, in this building. This is the post alignment coming through. Trench 1 is there.
Yeah.
And that's where Trench 2 is being put on the so-called barrow.
Yeah.
So we can actually start to work out and see if there's anything in, I mean, there are very complex patterns here, to see if they'll tell us anything about this post alignment. What is it leading towards? Is it an island that's been cultivated over 2,000 years? Are there settlements here? What type of settlements are there? The clues might be in here, and there are some features which start to look quite interesting on the edge of the island. You can see this dark line on here appears to be the edge of Northey Island.
Yeah.
It's like an old river channel. You can actually see on this map here where the crop marks start to end. It's this line down here.
What sort of date do we think this is?
Well, I reckon the earliest bits, like the barrow, I reckon they're at the very beginning of the Bronze Age, sort of 2000, 2500 BC, something like that.
It's all looking rather flat at the Barrow, but Phil seems to have found something to keep his spirits up.
Have a look at that flake again. Wherever has hit it has seated the blow quite well back. If that's a plough, the plough tends to just nick against the edge and you don't get any depth there. You don't know width at the top. And the quality of the raw material, all the gravel around here is absolute rubbish flint. You wouldn't consider making tools out of it. By God, you'd think of making a tool out of that. Beautiful quality, look at that. Not a flaw in it. So yeah, I have to have a little bit of faith in this. I think we could be in with a good chance.
If the Barrow is early Bronze Age, as Francis thinks it is, we need to find out what its connection is with the Trackway.
Oh, wow, look at that. Gosh, is that...
At Trench 1, the oak posts are beginning to show through.
Yes. That looks to me like oak. Yeah. It's remarkably well preserved.
Really?
It's remarkable.
So do you reckon they're coming up in a line, Jenny?
It's a bit hard to tell because we've only got 2 at the moment, so
Oh, right, yes.
I think we'll have to wait.
But even so, are they roughly in alignment with the track?
I think so, yeah.
Oh yes, I think they're in a line. And
Would we expect to see any signs of any marking on the edge of the axe marks or whatever on the edge there?
no, not that. That's a split face. That.
Oh,
so
right.
That's
So
actually where it's been split in half. And you get that on oak trees. I think because oak was so valuable, they tended to divide the trees up. And as saws hadn't been invented, you split them.
By pushing wedges in and then
doing
them
that.
apart,
Yeah.
When they excavated the Trackway at the mainland end under this power station, they found hundreds of bronze artefacts which had been dropped into the water. Most of the objects seem to have been placed in the water on the landward side of the Trackway. In the Bronze Age, these objects must have been really valuable. So why would people throw them into the water?
That's the sort, this is broken, isn't it? Was it like that when you found it?
Yes, yeah, actually we found this bit, which joins on there obviously, about sort of a metre away. It wasn't very far away at all. And it's actually broken on a casting floor. So
right, yeah. Oh yeah, I can see where the faults are now, and that's actually the bubbles in the metal. That wouldn't have been any use then, would it?
No, that's where it failed. And you'll notice, it's very bent, isn't it?
Do you think that just happened while it was in the ground?
No. That was done deliberately. I mean, that was probably put over someone's thigh and given a good whack, you know. I mean, this sword
deliberately trying to break it?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And that breaks deliberate as
and
well?
that breaks deliberate, yes. I'm sure of it. It's been broken to take it out of this world, to make it an item for the next world.
So these beautiful bronze objects were votive offerings, ritually broken and dropped into the water to honour the dead, or maybe to appease gods. In order to learn how these beautiful artefacts were created, we've invited Dave Chapman, a specialist in casting bronze implements, to work with us. Today, he's building the furnace he needs to melt bronze inside this tent. It's called a yurt, and it's normally where he lives.
What are we doing then, Dave?
Hi there, Mick. Well, building a bronze furnace here.
Yeah?
Out of clay.
Can I help?
That'd be great. Grab a ball of clay.
Reminds me of my potting days.
Yeah. All these different skills all get used.
So what are we going to use this for when it's finished?
Well, the idea is we're going to do a reproduction of an original bronze socketed axe, which was found here on the site.
Oh, right.
Which we've got here.
Wow, look at that, yeah.
It's a really lovely axe, this one.
Cool, crikey.
It's still got the timber inside from the haft.
Yeah. Oh. The thing's called 2 years, is it?
It is.
Ah, right. So what sort of temperature have we got to get up to before we can do this?
Well, the bronze will start to melt at about 1,000 degrees. But to be able to pour it, we've got to go quite a bit over that. We've got to get up to something around 1,200.
And this has all got to be smoothed.
Yep, the more it's all worked in, just like in building a pot.
The Barrow may have been ploughed out completely. All they're finding here is gravel and small pockets of silt, both of which occur naturally. Phil's having a bit of a problem making any sense of its geology at all.
Just more silt?
Just more silt, a silt pocket there. It's petering out over here. There's a line to the gravel coming down here, but with a distinct line there, but nothing on that side at all.
And the gravel's so clean too, and you've got
Very
no
clean.
nice edges or anything.
No fines.
No fines,
no
eh?
nothing. No one scrape, nothing.
No, I'm afraid it don't look very good. It's a shame. But it don't look very good at all.
Phil may be struggling to locate the Barrow, but at Trench 1, the wooden trackway is already being uncovered.
That is a pretty good-looking trench, isn't it?
It's good, isn't it? Yes, we're really pleased with it. And we're really pleased with what's coming out of it as well.
Which is?
Well, the first thing we hit was that large piece of wood sticking up between Maisie's feet there. Took the level down a bit further, and as you can see, we've now got a whole spread of wood right across the whole trench.
Now, do you think that some of this is just random, or is it all part of a walkway?
Well, I think some of it's clearly been rammed down into the ground. It's definitely a constructed walkway, but I think the random stuff that's strewn about is probably also part of the platform that's trying to make it traversable, as it were.
Back at Dave's yurt, the furnace is completed. And now it needs to be gently fired overnight in order to be ready to melt the bronze for the axe head.
When are you going to fire up the furnace?
Well, soon, I think, because it's almost finished, isn't it, Dave?
It is almost finished.
And what about tomorrow? We drew a bit of a blank with the Barrow today, didn't we?
No, I mean, I totally agree with Francis. I mean, I think it's absolutely crucial we find it, but I don't know, I don't look very good at the minute.
It's there. Just have confidence. I'm sure. Yeah, let me out there tomorrow morning. Yeah, I'll find it.
What about the walkway?
Well, thank goodness, that's the one bit that's actually going quite well at the moment. What we're going to do tomorrow is plan all the wood that we've got there at the moment and then take it all off and go down a layer and hopefully get down to the Bronze Age ground levels.
And that's where you found the Bronze Age bits and pieces at the other end of the walkway, wasn't it?
That's right, that's the pay dirt, yeah.
So hopefully tomorrow we might get some bronze finds, so join us after the break. And if we don't find any, then
we can make some.
It's day 2, and Phil's got off to an early start at the round Barrow. He was a little unsure at the end of yesterday, but Francis has come to convince him that the Barrow's ring ditch really is here.
Oh, you give me a shot.
The case of the disappearing Barrow.
Well, look, I mean, we got in here nice and early this morning, and we've gone down. We're right down on the solid, good gravel now.
Yep.
And, I mean, at the minute, there's still nothing showing up.
Ah, well, I'm quite happy what you got. Now, if you actually look at the latest and the highest tech of everything...
Using a global positioning device, Bernard has plotted the trench on the geophys plan of the Barrow to within a couple of centimetres.
There's your trench.
And our ring ditch cuts right the way through
Cuts right through it.
What's the scale of this?
Ah. Pass.
You amaze me.
Phil's using his own high-tech methods to find the elusive ring ditch.
13, 14, 15, 16, 17.
17.
17. So
Right.
2/3 of that's about 6 back.
About 6 back, yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
6.
It's about there then.
Yeah.
Oh! Ah! Francis? Look at that edge.
Oh, it's spot on. Yeah. That's it. That's it, all right, isn't it?
Beautiful edge.
And then look, on the side here, chop that up a bit. And you've got the...
Looks like you've got a cut coming down there too, yeah.
Yeah,
Look,
you've got the bank, I think, that went round the edge. I think.
Within our trench, the section of the Barrow looks like this. And originally, the Barrow would have looked like this. The trench was then extended at one end to pick up another section of the ring ditch. At the yurt, Dave's completed modelling the axe head in beeswax. Now, a clay mould has to be made around it to pour the molten bronze into.
Is this horse dung that you've got here?
It is.
What are you actually doing with it then?
I'm mixing it with the clay, the same as we did with the hay and the clay for the furnace.
So how much do you need to go with the clay?
1/3 dung to 2/3 clay.
Right, okay. What happens to it then?
Then we have to cover the waxes, which we've finished, in the clay mix.
Is there anything I can do to help you with that then?
Well, that'd be great, actually, yeah. If you could take little bits of clay and dip them in the water and then work them until they go quite soft. Yeah, that's good. Get them really nice and soft, because then they'll press onto the clay surface and cover it really smoothly.
Right, okay, I'm doing that.
They need to heat the mould slowly to melt out the wax inside. And while Dave fires the moulds, Phil's been allowed to leave his barrow for a while. He's helping Maisie Taylor, Flag Fen's wood consultant, to find a handle to haft the axe head onto.
What are we looking for?
What they're looking for is where a branch comes cleanly out of the trunk at the correct angle. The socketed axe head will be hafted onto the heartwood, which is inside the trunk.
The theory is often proven wrong, isn't it? Hey, that's the beauty of theories. They're usually written by people who've never tried it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, why don't you just shin up and measure it and see if it's nice?
What do you think I am, a monkey? Why don't we bring the tree down to us, right?
This oak tree is about 60 years old. Luckily for us, but not for the tree, it's being felled as part of a tree thinning programme in a managed woodland.
It's a very large handle, Maisie.
Yeah, I said you got a lot of wood to take out of that.
God, that's better.
You all right?
Yeah.
Right, I am glad. I thought you might ask me to help. Now, hang on, you've got to navigate the nettles and the brambles.
With such good preservation, there's a lot to be learnt from the 3,000-year-old plant remains. However, Trench 1 has been really slow going, with all the wood of the Trackway to uncover and record. Our environmental expert, Charles French, is taking a sample from the section. From the seeds contained in it, we'll be able to see how the island and Trackway looked 3,000 years ago. It's also possible to get an accurate date for the wood using Dendrochronology. That's a kind of barcode for wood, analysing the tree's yearly growth rings. The samples will be sent to a lab in Sheffield. Hopefully we'll get a date in the next day or so. After careful sieving, a trained eye can pick out and identify all sorts of different seeds that were growing here in the Bronze Age.
Gosh, they're tiny, aren't they? You wouldn't want to sneeze, would you?
No.
So, what species are they from?
Well, the dryland species we've got so far is elderflower here.
Oh, really? Right.
Yeah, and we've got a larger tree called alder.
Oh, we found some bits of that in the trench, in fact. Some of the wood there is
it ties in quite nicely with that. And going from the drier land, we can actually find plants which prefer more open water.
Oh, wow, what's that?
These are members of the buttercup family called water crowfoot, which produces masses and masses of white flowers at this time of year.
And that sort of actually sits on the water as well?
It sits on the water, yes, so you can get a massive blanket covering the whole lake.
Have we got anything from sort of further onto the dry land?
We have one thing from there, which is quite nice. I think it's probably emma wheat.
Oh, that's a prehistoric
It's a prehistoric,
isn't
yes,
it?
yes, exactly.
It's a very mosaic type of landscape, and parts of it are incredibly well managed. And if you think this whole fringe of the small developing lake around Flag Fen would have been full of natural resources to collect and exploit, and it would have been a beautiful place. I mean, nothing like that really exists in modern East Anglia Fenland today.
Victor's been making his own interpretation of Flag Fen in former times.
That's a gory thing in there. They're actually burning a body, you know, it's a cremation that they did. And what they did was they burned the body Then they moved the ashes over to the Barrow, so that's where we've been excavating, and we found.
So people may have been using the Trackway for their funeral processions, cremating their dead and interring the ashes in the burial mound, probably with grave goods for the next world.
I've just heard that you're now absolutely convinced this is a barrow.
There's
Why?
absolutely no doubt about it, Tony. This is the ditch of the arm, the trench we put in here. If you go over the spoil tip, you'll see where we found it this morning.
Over here?
Keep going round in an arc.
So this is the
Yep,
ditch.
that's it. Keep going
Follow the
round
ditch.
there.
Yeah.
Keep going round there.
Over here? Can I go across your tree?
Just see it? There it is, look.
Just I saw it in there. So it would go round. This is pretty much the area that Chris described yesterday morning, isn't it? So presumably it would go up here into the road.
That's plenty farther. There's a
I'm not
car
going any
coming.
further. Well, all right, I believe you. This is definitely a ring ditch.
Yeah.
But how do you know that it's Bronze Age?
Look at this. Not only would you know it's Bronze Age, but that must be associated with a body. Such high quality.
Is that an arrowhead?
Big triangular arrowhead.
Beautiful, isn't it? But why is it a Bronze Age one?
Well, that particular type of arrowhead with that beautiful ripple flaking on it, they occur around about 2000 BC and a little bit later.
Yeah.
And one was found in a barrow at Ibury, about 3/4 of a mile away from here. You could actually see it from here. And it was found with a pot of early Bronze Age type, a food vessel.
Quality
in
of
a
that
grave.
work is so good.
So is it a ceremonial one?
Oh yeah, that's not something
yeah.
you shoot at a duck.
No.
No, sir.
Without question, this flint arrowhead is a beautiful artefact, with exquisite ripple flaking, but more importantly for us, it's evidence that dates the first use of the barrow to the early Bronze Age, about 2000 BC. Paul Middleton's taking samples and checking their phosphate levels. If a cremated body were put in the barrow, the phosphate would enrich the surrounding soil and show up as a spike. He's set up a small field laboratory so that he can get results on site. The bluer the colour, the higher the phosphate levels and the probability of there being a burial.
The main thing is you've got lots of activity, haven't you?
There's definitely a lot of activity right the way across, which shows that there's an intensity of activity within the ditch.
Yeah, so in other words, you wouldn't expect to get something like that if it was just one burial and people walked off and left the site.
Not at all.
No,
I think
it's a long time, isn't it?
It's a long time. It's a good build-up and a certain intensity of activity. So although the barrow seems to have been badly ploughed, we're getting traces of that activity there still.
Oh, I better get back to it.
Which is good.
The best is yet to come. Look, now, be careful where you're walking. Do you see this
dark stain?
You can see round.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, where I'm walking.
That's right.
Yeah, along here.
That is the foundation of a roundhouse.
Yeah.
But if it's down here, does that mean that it predates the barrow?
It must do. You do not put a roundhouse on a burial mound, but you might put a burial mound on a roundhouse.
Hang on, doesn't this rather knock on the head your idea of this being an island of the dead? Because I thought that one of the things about an island of the dead was that people didn't live on them.
Oh no, far from it. No, this was probably where a big man lived, okay? He dies, and then his soul goes to the next world, and they put a house of the dead over his house of the living. They put a barrow where he actually lived, so he sleeps in eternity in his house of the dead.
This is a slight kind of veering off for this particular theory, isn't it?
It's called thinking on your feet.
It's still a great story. We've got another day and a half to see whether it's right or not.
It's looking great though, isn't it, eh?
It is.
Anyway,
So the barrow was placed on top of the roundhouse around 2000 BC. Francis thinks that this roundhouse, which probably looked like this, is the oldest house ever found in Britain. It must be at least 4,000 years old. I wonder what it would actually have looked like inside. We looked at one that Francis had previously excavated and reconstructed.
How many people would have lived in here?
About 10, maybe 12.
And in Bronze Age times, there would have been a number of these scattered all around this landscape?
Yeah, this is a farmhouse. It would have been dotted through the fields. You probably looked out of that door and you'd have seen 4 or 5, something like that.
Stuart and Mick are trying to get a better look at the area from the air. They're really interested to see if they can find the place where the trackway would have met the island.
This is Northey Island.
Yeah.
This is where the causeway was headed towards, and presumably in prehistory, these little islands of higher ground were prime territory for settlement.
Well, hunter-gatherers, then settlers, farmers, and so on. And then you can see our trench very clearly.
That's trench 1, isn't it?
Trench 1 with the timber. So as we come round now, we're looking back down the alignment towards the power station, aren't we?
Yeah.
And what we've got to do now, I think, is dig a bit to the east or to the left of that trench, haven't we?
Further away from the building.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to get the transition from the wet ground onto higher,
Up onto
drier
the
ground.
higher ground, yeah.
Mick's looking for the point where the trackway joined the island, so Carenza can open trench 3. If it's the same as the mainland end, then this is where votive offerings may have been placed in the water. Carenza and Mick are taking samples from the subsoil, trying to find where the peat finishes and the island's gravel begins. When they find the landfall, they'll open trench 3.
What we really want to do is put in a long, thin trench that will catch the edge of the trackway. We won't, if we find wood of the trackway, we won't go down into it at all. We'll carry the trench along until we get to the edge of the trackway and then go down at the edge of the trackway, which is where we hope we'll find any artefacts that were being thrown off the edge of the trackway into the water.
How long before you can start?
Well, we're there, aren't we? We're there. We can bring the machine in now and cut our trench back across that way.
4 o'clock.
We're going to start it now. If you clear off, we'll get on with it, right?
Can I believe you?
Yeah.
I'll just stand a little way off.
Katie, bring the machine in.
The land would flood with the water coming in.
Francis, you're still pretty convinced about the island of the dead theory, aren't you? Even though we've seemed to have found some kind of hut underneath.
Oh, I love it.
Barrow.
I love it, yeah.
Whereas you, Stuart, are more sceptical about it.
Yes.
Why?
Because you've got all this activity which is part of living. You've got this agricultural landscape, you've got these boundaries, trackways. This is a landscape where people are farming, they're living, they're enjoying life, and they're dying. The things in pink are later than the Bronze Age, they're Iron Age and later. If we take those off, what we're left with is a series of features which lots of evidence point towards them being Bronze Age. We have a series of linear boundaries which form themselves into a pattern of fields. We have trackways.
How do you feel about what he's just said? He's saying it's not an island of the dead, it's an island of the living. There's farms on it and, I don't know, maybe habitation or whatever.
That's fine by me. I mean, the island of the dead is the island in the mind, in the perception of people there. Just as Lindisfarne, Holy Island, you've got sheep grazing around the, the ancient part, the holy bit. I find it interesting, actually, when you look at that closely. There seems to be a reserved area with outfields leading up to the barrows. It's sitting there in splendid, glorious isolation, and I reckon it was a very important place, and people came there from miles around. OK, so people came from there locally, but I can imagine them coming along that timber walkway, as we like to call it, post-alignment, whatever you want to call it, and going there and burying their dead.
How do you feel about that, the idea of people bringing their dead from some way away and sticking them in the barrows?
I think I slightly don't support that theory at the moment.
It's amazing how polite archaeologists are when they argue with each other, isn't it?
I don't see in some essence that this feature, its main reason is to move bodies across from one dry ground to another piece of dry ground. I think it's much more important than that.
I'll go along with that.
It's been a really frustrating day in this trench today. The idea was that we'd get rid of all this late Bronze Age wood here so that we could get down onto the earlier stuff underneath. But before we could do that, we had to record all the later wood. And that recording has taken all flipping day. We've had to draw every single knot hole, I think. So we've now decided we haven't got time to excavate any further in this whole trench. We're just going to excavate in this area. So hopefully, by this time tomorrow, we'll be down on the early Bronze Age stuff.
From outside, it sounds like an extremely large animal breathing in here.
That's it, the fire dragon.
Yeah, that's exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah, we've got to keep feeding that fire because it's burning away pretty fierce at the bottom.
Yeah. 99,000. There's your 1,000 degrees.
At 1,000 degrees, the bronze in the furnace is beginning to melt. But to pour it, the temperature must be at least 1,150 degrees. The clay moulds are hot and ready. The firing has melted the beeswax and burnt out the horse dung, which makes them porous, so gases can escape when the bronze is poured into them. If they weren't porous, they'd explode.
That's good. OK, that's brilliant. You've got it turned the right way. That's it. Great.
11:48. 11:49. 11:50. 11:50.
OK, play about. Slide the lid off.
If Dave's been successful, we'll have a beautiful bronze axe head inside. Join us after the break when we smash open the mould to take a look.
We've still got a heck of a lot of work to do at the walkway and we've only got one day left. But here at the Barrow, this entire end of the trench has been transformed. And it looks as though Francis and his lot have been working since dawn. What's going on here?
Well, actually, Tony, we've made the trench bigger.
I spotted that. Why?
Well, we've had some very exciting news. There's done a phosphate survey down the edge of this trench here.
Yeah.
And they show that outside the trench, the phosphate levels are low, outside the Barrow, whereas in the Barrow, they're uniformly high, except for a spot down here. And there's a massive phosphate spike. There's a huge concentration.
What could have caused that?
Could be bones. I know what you're thinking. It could also be a contented cow standing there and dropping cow pats 3,000 years ago.
So it's either an early Bronze Age noble or it's dung.
Well, there's loads of other things it could be as well.
Like what?
Well, it could be a mole. Right?
And this is right in the centre of where the ring ditch is.
And it's also the place where we found the flint arrowhead.
How are we going to find out? Do we just do a simple, small excavation?
Yeah, very careful hand dig, looking out for bones. When you see grinning teeth, then you stop.
Yeah.
The haft for the axe is coming on really well. Let's hope they've got an axe head to fit onto it after yesterday's bronze pouring.
That's excellent.
God, look at that. Well, that's looking very good, isn't it? Is it in there?
There we go. Oh, it's very hot still. Right,
Yeah.
there you go.
That's fantastic, isn't it? Yeah.
It's all there.
Lovely.
You're pleased with that?
Yep, pleased enough.
So using exactly the same methods as Bronze Age people did, our socketed axe has been created. Now we need to haft it so that Phil can try it out. At the Trackway, Trench 1, Maze is lifting one of the excavated posts. It's a delicate procedure and the object of the exercise is to lift it out in one piece if possible.
You think we'll be able to get the tip out?
I'm not letting him out of this hole till he does.
It's like a dog trying to find a bone.
Make sure you got your hands right underneath. That's it.
Oh, it's just slippery, isn't it?
I'll come round and join you.
They're going to preserve it now by putting it in a tank of water.
Yeah. Certainly no gravels in, not hitting them. There we go.
Meanwhile, Stuart is taking more soil samples.
What's that then? Right. I can see it's wet and orange, but what is it?
Yeah, we've basically got sand. There's some silt in it, but we're looking at something laying down by water. Not.
He's trying to prove his theory to Francis that the post alignment is more than just a trackway. Did you get any evidence to support your challenge?
Yes, we did. We cut samples down through the soil. This is the post alignment, and the samples showed here quite clearly that we've got a river channel coming through here, an old river channel. So where the landfall of the post alignment is assumed to be is actually on a separated little bit of land. Now, if you look at the flood model that Ray's put together, over time the waters are coming in, they're retreating, they're advancing. With that information, as the flood waters come in, watch what happens.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The post alignment ends on an island.
Yeah.
The Bronze Age farmers would have been, to some extent, scared stiff of what they were seeing. They'd see their land being taken from them, and they live off their land. They live on it. It's fundamental to their existence.
Right.
So why would what you call a post alignment end on a tiny little island?
I think because what it's doing is making a statement in the landscape in terms of being a boundary. It's a symbolic boundary. It's against the threat of invasion by water, not by people.
Yeah, but that's a fairly simple symbolic boundary, OK? I think there was a much more profound symbolic boundary in people's minds. And that's a symbolic boundary between life and death. And what reinforces that idea is that the finds that we make are all on one side of it. They tend not to be on Stuart's wet side.
So they all tend to be in our territory?
In our side, in our territory.
Yeah.
So, I like that a lot.
So the sea level was rising at that time in the Bronze Age. The post alignment was both a physical and a ritual boundary. Carenza?
Oh, hi there.
Yesterday afternoon, this was going to be the really exciting trench. It was going to be from this walkway that our Bronze Age people stood and lobbed all their ritual Bronze Age implements into the water.
We're getting some really, really interesting finds out of here. We're getting several bits of posh late Bronze Age pottery. There's see this sort of really nice fine.
Now, why do you say that's
shine.
Posh? That just looks like a bit of old anthracite.
That's really nice, black, polished. You imagine that when it was clean and new, that's been burnished. It would have been a really nice sort of black, shiny bowl.
Yeah.
It looks like that's a vessel that's been smashed in place here, and that looks like a ritual activity. And to support that, just down the trench where Katie is there, we've got a horse's jawbone.
Which is not a meat item off of the animal at all.
It's not a bit you use for meat. It looks, again, as if that was a highly valued, much loved animal, which, again, is part of a ritual deposition.
You've also got a lot of these white pebbles.
I mean, this one here has just come up. They're all the same. They're all roughly this sort of size. They're quartz. They've been beach rolled, so they're smoothed.
So they wouldn't have come out of the land here?
No, they're not sort of washed in with a load of gravel. Obviously, they've come in naturally. There've been a whole load of other pebbles with them as a
So for some reason, people have brought these white stones off a beach and brought them here.
It's not uncommon elsewhere. You get it in early Christian times in Ireland, and you get it in Cornwall as well. It looks as if they select particularly white stones to drop in significant places.
Well, I can't help feeling that this seems to be something. This is a deliberate ritual act as well.
Back at the Barrow, the phosphate spike has been confirmed as a definite cremation. But what proof have they found? It doesn't look nearly as exciting as I thought it would. It just looks like a little step in the trench.
It's very exciting.
Why?
What I've got here is actually somebody's tooth. That's fractured dental enamel. During the cremation process, the dentine inside the tooth expands and the enamel on the outside fractures and breaks off.
Will there be fines, do we think?
Well, there may well be, because very often cremated remains were actually buried with uncremated artefacts, as well as cremated artefacts. So we
can't go down until we know how far it extends.
But it's 12:30.
We still can't go down until we know how far it extends. Even at 12:30.
When can we go down?
As soon as you get out of the way.
You always say that. You always say that. But we won't be able to do it today.
You bet. We've got to.
That great big chunk of tree is barely recognisable now. Phil and Maisie seem to be really happy with it.
But I mean, it is for all that. I mean, it's a beautiful object, isn't it? Just a great sort of use of the flow of the wood.
It's interesting though how difficult we found to make it, and the more I work on this material, the more I think that the Bronze Age people must have been the greatest woodworkers.
So you want to put down like that?
Yeah, straight in and lean down, okay?
God, stone that crows.
I think we're probably there.
I think we are.
Lift it out.
God, stone that crows.
Lift it out.
What? Oh, what? Off the...
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Right, I'm going to go cool this down.
Good Lord, look at that. God, look at that sap come out of there, look, don't.
So where's he gone now?
This is going to be a granny.
Yeah, that one is a granny. The one before wasn't it? The one before was a reef. You reckon that's now ready for you to try it out, do you?
Every bit, and it's waiting and I'm waiting too. Oh.
Oh, that's all right, isn't it?
Look at that.
Look at that.
So you get the imprint of the blade actually on the end of the stake. That's like the ones they find on the site. You can see how it happens now.
It's coming off in parallel chips, really.
Yeah.
That's good, isn't it? That is good. That is good.
And
Look
then
at
a bad
that.
point, you know, is it?
You'd soon knock that in, wouldn't you?
Yeah. You would.
Oh wow, look at that. Oh, that's fantastic. You can actually see all the scoops of the axe marks there, can't you? Did you get the tip out of the ground in the end, Chris?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. So that fits on sort of like that, does it? Amazing, I can see the cut marks here. Are they a bronze axe, presumably, if that's the date?
Absolutely, no question. Yep, absolutely.
And they carry on down into the...
Yes, and as you get towards the end, the preservation improves. So we come down here, and here we've got this, they're not bothering to finish the woodworking, so the axe is going in, so this isn't really attached. And if we were to lift it off, we'd get the perfect shape of the axe where it had bitten in. Has Ian got the date?
I don't know, let me find out. Ian?
Yeah.
Hi there, have you got the dendro dates for those bits from Flag Fen yet?
Well, they've just come through.
Oh, brilliant.
But we've not got dates for all of them yet.
Oh, right, OK. Can you give me dates for any of them?
Well, we've got dates for what you've called number 4.
What's the date for that?
For number 4?
Yeah, so...
Number 4, we've got rings running right out to 1090 BC. So the bit of wood is probably from the mid-1000s, so 1060, 1050 BC period.
1060 BC,
Yeah.
1,000 years BC. That's fantastic. Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. That's exactly the sort of date we were hoping for, really, wasn't it? That's
absolutely.
The flint arrowhead grave goods tell us that the first use of this barrow was in about 2000 BC. What we need now is to try to confirm that it continued to be used right through to the time the trackway was in use, which according to our dendro date was in about 1000 BC.
By golly, I think we've got a piece of bone.
Really?
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Ploughing, worm action, water and ice have destroyed almost all of this cremation. After more than 3,000 years in the earth, it's remarkable to find a piece of human bone like this.
Oh!
It comes from a little shouldered bowl or jar. Can only be one thing, that's late Bronze Age fineware. It's exactly like the stuff they were finding on the post alignment. Same fabric, same fabric, everything.
That ties the dates back in again.
So, yeah, it can only be that.
Yeah.
It's about 900.
Yeah.
900 BC or thereabouts.
It's quite.
I mean, that is an amazing.
Yeah, it's exactly
tie up, really, knowing that trackway and this monument were still being used or were being used at the same time.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Proves it beyond any doubt.
Oh yeah.
So here it is, proof that the round barrow was used as a cemetery for more than 1,000 years. This cup was placed in the grave as a gesture to a much-loved family member 3,000 years ago. A final drink to prepare them for the next world.
Yeah.
Grubby little piece, but by God, ain't that important?
Oh, yeah.
Well, in just 3 days, we've learnt an awful lot about Flag Fen, the island of the dead, and the ancient Britons who lived and died here 4,000 years ago. We've had a fantastic 3 days, haven't we? And at last we're in part of Flag Fen that looks like it must have looked 3,500 years ago when our Bronze Age walkway stretched across the landscape. And we're here because Francis has got one more task to perform. What is it?
It's rather a wet one, actually. Dave the metalworker is very keen that we put something back into Flag Fen, having removed so much over the years. And to be quite honest, I'm very happy to do it.